As far back as I can remember, I've always loved TV, even more so than movies. There's something about spending extra time just hanging out with your characters and seeing how they develop over a series. I grew up during the golden age of television, where TV narratives can be just as dynamic as films, but still tell stories in their own unique ways. When I started making Midlands Mayhem, I didn't think we'd get past one episode. But with every successful shoot, we got more momentum behind us. If our first big project was an indie film, I don't know if we would have made it all the way. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I made a 5-part comedy crime miniseries called Midlands Mayhem. The quick pitch would be it's Hardy Bucks crossed with love-hate. If you're not Irish, that won't make much sense to you. But one is a comedy about guys in a small town that do nothing but drink and get into antics, while the other is Ireland's premier gangster show. That sounds like a tall order mixing those two concepts together, and it was. But it didn't start out that way. Midlands Mayhem started out by taking elements of another failed project between my friends. The story started out all the way in 2020. The first step in our journey was during the COVID lockdowns. Myself, Ennis, Canner, and one other person made 2 short videos, somewhere on the level of a classic Filthy Frank sketch. This had all the absurdity and lore that comes with one of those projects. It was called the Phantom series. They were terrible, badly shot, full of in-jokes that only our schoolmates would get, and generally a bit crass. But a key decision that made it a film, rather than a silly internet video, was deciding not to show any shots of us breaking character. We made 2 of them, and I showed them to a few people in my film college. They seemed to find it funny, which would lead us on to making the 3rd part to this series. In 2021, we went all out and organized the project as best we could. For the first 2, we had no script. I was operating the camera, and nearly everything was improvised. For the 3rd part, a person from my college, Shane, would be operating the camera, along with a couple others coming to help out. Before, Phantom 1 and 2 were done in the space of a few hours. Phantom 3 took place over 3 days. We had a full script, which went through many revisions, a full shot list, schedule, locations, and basically everything you'd expect from an amateur film project. The shoot was mostly successful. It was full of absurdist comedy, so any issues that we encountered could be played off as a joke. For example, we lost a hat between scenes. We decided it would be funny if the actor was very obviously wearing different clothes going from one scene to another. There was magic, ghosts, and the main villain died at the end because he was reminded of his heart defect, which instantly caused a heart attack. Next year, we wanted to continue this project with the 4th entry to the series. We all saw it as a learning opportunity. I got to practice my directing, Shane got to hone his camera work, and we all had fun as we didn't take it too seriously. The final script for the 4th film was ready, and we were about to do a table read. But our friend from school, who was the main focal point of the series, dropped out. It was a bit upsetting at the time, but I don't hold any grudges. This left us scrambling as we still wanted to make something this year. About 5 of us sat down and brainstormed new ideas. There was an element from that script that we took as the focal point for our next project. That element was the Elder Council of the Sesh. In Phantom 4, there was a council of wizards and elder beings who also loved to drink and party. This was the key thing that we adapted for Midlands Mayhem. During our brainstorming process, we decided that we were going to take the project a lot more seriously. That meant no magic, no superpowers, and no 4th wall breaks. All of these elements were meant to enhance the comedy. Bad VFX were a part of that. When you saw a terrible stock wizard spell, it was part of the joke. But since we wanted to push our skills to be taken more seriously as a show, we would only do what we're capable of doing. VFX was not one of those things. We broke down a rough plot, developed a few characters that at the beginning had similar archetypes to our previous project. Ennis, a hard man that never shows his emotions, is a capable fighter, but he's bored with his life. Seshika, the leader of the council who's aloof but selfish. Mad Jack, an unhinged lunatic that serves as the antagonist. And surprisingly, when reviewing our initial ideas, Canner's character was a lot different from the one that he portrayed on screen. He was supposed to be the stoner archetype, but is hiding something sinister. We'll come back to how that changed. In Phantom, the original plot contained one purely serious character. At the end of the script, it would reveal that the main villain of Phantom 4 was working for this shadowy figure called Prime. we would have expanded on this character in further entries to the Phantom series. We loved this idea because we could develop our dramatic storytelling. In the context of the Phantom series, he would have been playing the straight man archetype to the silliness that was taking place. But knowing how Midlands Mayhem plays out, that character took over the plot and tone completely. Let's move on to the production of episode 1. Since we were just a ragtag group of recently graduated college students, we didn't have a lot of money to put towards this project. Gear-wise, prior to the shoot, Shane had purchased a new camera. The Lumix S5 to be exact. I had purchased a director's monitor along with the transmission feed for it, and I got some sound gear for Christmas. Otherwise, we worked with the gear that myself and Shane already had. There were some lights that our film college was giving away, and some cheap RGBs that I bought a year or two ago. This is where we had to get creative and started jerry-rigging our own versions of a dolly and a snorri cam. We found some videos online about making your own dollies. It's a plank of wood with some skateboard wheels on a PVC pipe, which worked okay for a while. The building of a snorri cam was a bit more difficult. Just in case you aren't aware, a snorri cam is a rig that you attach to yourself that provides this interesting front-on perspective. The most famous use case is likely this shot from Requiem for a Dream. Shane managed to find an Instagram reel with a self-built snorri cam, which we worked backwards to make one ourselves. Ennis built it from PVC pipe, and inserted a ball mount that we could attach the camera to. You had to strap it to yourself with 2 weightlifting belts, and operating the camera had to be done wirelessly. Now it's time to get to our shooting locations. We primarily shot in the small Irish town of Killucan. Ennis is from there, and his parents were able to help us get locations in the surrounding areas. Most importantly, the council room, the primary location for Midlands. It was a shed that wasn't really being used, so we inhabited it for the next 2 years. Similarly, Ennis's dad was running the Killucan kennels at the time, which has been sold since. But we used the house there as the primary base of operations and Ennis's house within the show. There was a variety of locations across Killucan, like the canals for Seshika's introduction and the opening scene. The location for Ennis's workplace was owned by someone in the Ennis family, who we just asked if we could use, and they were more than happy to oblige. Small town Ireland is great. The final location we scouted was the scenic lake to introduce Prime, which ended up being Loch Derravara. When we went there, there was this lovely little bridge that you could walk onto and stare out at the lake. It had the benefit of being completely empty as well. We all thought it was a beautiful location, and it looked great on camera. But oh my god, did it cause trouble. This will come up throughout. But you know what didn't come up throughout? That fucking bridge. I feel like I've been part of some Mandela effect because we never saw that bridge again. There wasn't any traditional casting process for Midlands, as we were working without any money. I called upon all my friends that had any interest in being a part of it. There was a total of 1 professional actor in the friend group, that being Max. That's not to say the others didn't have experience or enthusiasm, and some of the cast would continue to pursue acting after Midlands was completed, but the level of experience was quite low amongst the cast, which was, and still is, incredibly impressive to me how everyone managed to give a great performance throughout the show. Let's run down the list. Of course, there's Max, who is a professional actor and has been in plenty of ads and short films. Ennis had only really been in things that I had dragged him into, like the Phantom series. And same goes for Canner. Mad Jack was a professional actor at one point, having been the lead in a feature that was never released. However, he retired from acting and decided to pursue other avenues. Seshika had been in a short in college, but otherwise nothing else. And Dr. Sinbad was in one short I dragged him into during my first year of college. That's everyone in the main cast, bar of course my character, initially known as Prime and would later be known as Ed. Why did I decide to cast myself in this show? Well, there's one massive reason. I'll do it for free. Also, it was only for one scene at the end of the episode, which wouldn't interfere with my ability to direct all the other scenes. This decision would have a lot of consequences later in the show, which I'll address as they come up. But acting and directing at the same time, with not a lot of experience in either, is a major challenge to say the least. There were some minor characters that appeared in the first episode, although at the time we had no idea that they would be in a minor role, such as the Tune Baron, Padder, Kieran, Fergal, and Dan. Well, we knew Dan would have a minor role, because we needed him for our crew. And I suppose we knew Fergal would be in a minor role because he dies within the first minute. The crew was incredibly small. Anybody in the crew had appeared on camera at some point as well. Of course, the roles shifted throughout the episodes, which I will note as we go on. But for the first episode, I was the director, co-producer, writer, and editor. Shane was the co-producer, director of photography, and camera operator. Ennis was the lead actor, executive producer, locations manager, and stunts. Kenner was an actor and executive producer. Kieran assistant directed for us, and there was 2 people for sound, Sean and Dan. Dan ended up wearing a lot of hats throughout the show. We also had Liam and Fergal helping us out with smaller camera roles. There wasn't a dedicated set designer, so we all pitched in to make the sets. We did lose and acquire additional crew members along the way, but at any given time, I don't think our crew surpassed 8 people, and for any given scene, the total number was never above 5. With set design being a group task, that brings us to one of our core tenets we established for Midlands, and that was to shoot within our means. The show was specifically set up to work within our low budget. The thrown together style of the sets would work in context because that's how characters would set them up within the world of Midlands. Take for example the council room. It contains a bunch of hand-me-downs from camping equipment, along with random items you can imagine someone would have left in their shed, all hastily thrown together in a day. The council table was a total of 5 doors we got for free on Done Deal, with 2 doors as the base vertically and 3 doors on the top horizontally, all stuck together. They were propped up on an old bath that was left in the middle of the shed. We put some green felt and these cheap RGB lights on it to give it some texture. While it does have a thrown together style, that doesn't mean it was easy. God, it took a lot of effort to set up. Once again, thanks to Ennis's parents, they gave us some leftover church pews from their shed, as well as letting us borrow the throne-like chair from their house.
That's my throne.
We got very lucky in that regard, and made what little we had work. Since we had limited resources on how many people we could get on screen at any given time, we came up with the Wall of the Fallen. I got a bunch of people I knew, even some outside of Ireland, to send us photos of them on the session. A session, or sesh if you didn't know, is just Ireland's term for a party. Anyway, the intent was to make the world feel lived in, and to show that there were other councils out there. But most importantly, it was to set up future plot lines. It's coming up to our shoot day, October 21st, 2022. We've done all the scouting for the locations, we've had a rehearsal with all the actors, and gotten all the proper documentation we need. We cruise up on the Friday evening, bringing the gear needed to our base of operations, and design the sets to the best of our abilities. We have 3 days and a 16-page script. Time to do this. The first location is the canal. This had Seshika's introduction, and later in the day will be Canner's house. Disaster immediately strikes, and we haven't even gotten a single shot. Our audio recorder isn't working. Fuck! Panicked, myself and Shane and Dan are all frantically searching on the internet to find out what the problem is. Are the cables we have just faulty? Did the recorder break? That doesn't make sense, it was working last night when we did a test. Oh god, we're screwed. Are we gonna lose a whole day because of this? This project is fucked if we can't get this working. Someone's gonna have to drive all the way to Dublin to get a new one. Finally, I come across something on Google. What size is the SD card? 64 gigabytes? Try a 32. It works. Thank God. Okay, we're an hour behind, but the camera equipment is set up and we can start rolling. We need a few takes, but we get performances I'm happy with. This was the first taste of the improvised style that I came to develop across this shoot. It's interesting to think that we had incredible difficulty holding it together with the comedic improv for this section.
Yeah, what are you doing?
Well, I'm about to go in for my yearly tuberculosis checkup.
Considering that by the end of this episode, riffing lines was commonplace and no one batted an eye. I suppose that's how a style develops. We're back on track. Breaking for lunch ends up being a little later than we had planned, but we make up the missing time by cutting some planned shots. On to Canner's house, which doesn't really suit the vibe we're going for. It's way too fancy. That will become a strength later in the series, but for now we need a solution because it's the only location we have. Okay, into the mind of Canner. Right, headcanon. This is his parents' house, who are probably rich but absentee. He'd probably decorated with a bunch of really shitty sesh decorations for when his friends come over. Yeah, that'll work. It takes a bit, we front load Patter's coverage because he's got plans later, but we get the scene done without any major hiccups. This is the scene where Mad Jack really developed into the character that he is throughout the show. In the script, he was a bit generic. Not exactly a throwaway side villain, but didn't really have any flair to him. Fortunately, Mad Jack's actor Connor brought his own style to it. For what started out as a comedy, it was the perfect fit.
They're like a bunch of little session goblins.
If you're Irish, there might be a comparison of Mad Jack in this first episode to the Viper from Hardy Bucks. Surprisingly, Connor had never seen Hardy Bucks before, and at least on his end was a total coincidence. Or maybe it's just a character archetype, depending on your perspective. It's Sunday, and we're on to day 2. There's no location moves, we're in the council room all day. Now, while this is technically all one scene, I split it up into 3 sections. The first being Ennis's reintroduction to the council. Second, the council meeting. And third, Mad Jack's arrival. I'm about to make an absolutely wild comparison here, but there's a video essay on the Nerd Writers channel about the Battle of Helm's Deep in Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers. He talks about how in that sequence, it's structured like a mini-film with 3 acts, and that's what makes it so compelling. I thought that was a very cool idea, and I wanted to replicate it for this sequence. This was my first time directing a scene with this many people. I had to adapt quickly. Not only figuring out what the subjects of the scene were doing, but also the background elements with all the characters moving around and making the council feel alive. We did try this all in one take, but it was a bit too difficult to execute. That doesn't mean we wasted our time. We got a rough idea of how each section would play out, and it gave our actors a lot more room to play with the material. We got through the first section without too many hiccups and moved on to the council meeting. This is where things started to get stressful. Time got away from us, and before we knew it, it's 6 p.m. and we haven't even touched on Mad Jack's arrival. That's a big problem because it's Sunday, and most people here had to go home the next day for work. Only a few of us had either booked it off or didn't have a traditional work schedule. We had initially planned for the whole council to be there for all 3 sections, but now we've got to come up with a solution for why everyone leaves. Okay, first of all, let's figure out who can stay. There's the people who are booked for Monday, Max is a freelancer, and the Tune Baron is still in college, so they're both free tomorrow. Okay, we can work with that. I've just had a thought. You know what would be funny? What if everyone just left as soon as Mad Jack arrived? These people are supposed to be scumbags, and it is a comedy. Alright, let's roll with it. And if I'm being honest, this fix is much better than our original plan. In the script, everyone just stayed and cheered when Ennis beat up Mad Jack. But that doesn't make much sense. Like Dan says in the episode,
Correct what? There's 20 of us and one of you, dickhead.
Yeah.
somehow, out of an incredible time crunch, we lucked into an outcome that's better than what was on paper. I had the idea that when I was developing my skills as a director, I would stick to comedies. If this were a full drama, I wouldn't have an out like that. The script would just be screwed, I'd have to cut a load of scenes. But since we decided to do a comedy, stuff like this fits in. You'd never think that this wasn't the original intention. But we're not out of the woods yet, and we have a lot left to shoot. Fortunately, we had practiced exactly how the fight was going to go when we did our location scouting. Okay, in the script it says someone throws a can at Mad Jack's head. Shit, we kinda need to avoid logos. It's something I didn't think of when writing. The Tune Baron can just insult him instead, and Mad Jack can riff off that. Great. Okay, we're at one of the last shots, and we're pushing in on Ennis. His episode's arc is complete. It takes 5 tries, but we get it.
Have a bit of crack, yeah?
Tristan.
Wait. Shit. Ennis accidentally called Canner his real name. Fuck! Oh, we're out of time, and we still have to figure out how to splash blood on Max's face. Let's just roll with it. God, that was stressful, but we made it. It's 1 a.m., we're all wrecked, and we have to get up early for the final shoot day tomorrow. But I'm happy with what we got. Side note, this sequence contains one of my favorite jokes in the entire show.
I mean, Dan's dead, but it's no real reason to stop the sesh, I suppose.
That wasn't something that we planned. In the edit, I slotted it in, and it was fucking hilarious. It reinforced that all of these people are blind drunk scumbags. It's the final day, and there's 4 scenes to shoot. We've got the lake scene, the house montage, Ennis's introduction, and the episode's opener, to be shot in that order. The house montage has always been tricky for me. In the episode, the purpose of that scene is to show that Ennis is bored with his life, hence him going to Canner's house and the plot continuing. However, it was filmed as a stylistic montage. What I'm saying is, the camera work doesn't match the message I was trying to convey. But if I did just show him being bored without all the style, wouldn't the viewer be bored? This is something I've yet to rectify in my mind. I think I made the right decision prioritizing viewer entertainment over narrative cohesion with the camera work. I'm sure I'm not the only filmmaker to come across this issue with how you show a character being bored without losing the audience. Well, we're running late again. That's half the scenes out of the way, but we're coming up to 5 PM and we still have 2 scenes to shoot. We're running out of daylight, and what makes it worse is we brought lav mics for this scene and they're not working. Shit, okay, we'll have to raw dog it. Dan says he can get it. We don't have enough time to do a bunch of different shots. Okay, let's do a oneer. Thankfully, we get it in 3 takes. Sorted. Now we can move on to the Fergal death. And the timing works out perfectly. We have a bit of daylight, and it can get progressively darker as we shoot it. The plan worked out. A funny thing about this scene is the person honking at Fergal is unscripted, and it worked so well.
Is it fucking... Fuck off, you dickhead, man.
God bless whoever did that. We made it all the way on what was my most stressful shoot thus far, and now it's time to go home. We're all exhausted. Most of us stay in Canner's actual house for the night, and as soon as we get into the house, we immediately start brainstorming ideas for episode 2. Everyone was excited and wanted to keep going. Even through all the stress, we enjoyed it. We didn't have a solid plan to continue the series, but now that it's shot, it feels real. We're gonna go somewhere with this. The biggest idea I remember coming from this brainstorming session was the Mad Jack breakdown. Connor initially suggested it for episode 2, but I thought it would be better later on in the series to give us more time to develop Jack. But as you may have noticed, I skipped over talking about the lake scene, and that's where we intersect with the reshoots of this episode. While the shoot was a success overall, there were a couple of things we forgot to get, like this shot of Dan, or a couple of bits in the montage. But the main scene that wasn't working from the original footage was the lake scene. Remember the Phantom series? Well, in that, the main villain was going to be a guy in a mask and a suit called Prime. We took that concept and placed it directly into Midlands, but it didn't really work for the tone. In a world where there's magic and surrealist comedy, that could have been good, but Midlands was much more grounded. We needed to rework Prime's character. Shane and I brainstormed for a while. Instead of people fearing him for a mysterious reason, let's just make him an intimidating presence. Much more physical, towering over people. Also, my speaking voice is a bit posh, not quite scary enough, so let's change it. And that's where we have this. Also, Prime is a stupid name. Let's drop it and call him Ed. There is one bit of costume design I specifically purchased for this, and that's Ed's black jacket. Ed wears black and white with a similar jacket to Ennis, except Ennis is wearing grey, a contrast to how these characters see the world. Here's another decision I'm not so sure about: hiding Ed's face. This was another holdover from the Phantom series. We were gonna hide Prime's face with a mask and later reveal it's Ennis from another multiverse. Multiverses weren't overdone at that point, okay? The decision was partially because of that, and partially as a cliffhanger to entice the viewer to continue watching. The issue with hiding Ed's face is that it made it incredibly difficult to shoot any scene with Ed in it. It severely limited how we can execute a scene since we can only show Ed from the chin down. There's a scene in episode 2 that this really causes issues with, but we'll get there. In the edit for episode 1, I had to go crazy moving the frame around to make sure it didn't catch the upper side of my face. It turns out having a free-flowing camera while trying to hide a specific part of your face is quite a challenge. It also limited my performance. I found that eyes always show the most emotion, and with this decision, Ed's are hidden. Not only did it cause issues until the face reveal, there is also a massive downside with any promotional material for Midlands. Obviously, I couldn't put myself in the poster. I was limited with what shots I could show in the 2 trailers. Also, I'm showing my face right now. Anybody that hears about Midlands this way will have that spoiled for you. But I can hardly make someone else present this video. That's a whole heap of issues. But there are positives. When we premiered the series, lots of people said that they liked that decision. I suppose it does have an air of mystery to it like I intended. Here's a big one though. I absolutely love the face reveal scene. We'll talk about that when we get there, but the mystery behind the face does lend to one of the best elements in Ed's first scene, and that's the track. Tef, our composer, joined the project much later. By that point, we only had temp tracks and a vague idea of what we wanted. There was an artist called Lex that I had found ages ago through a track list for a video essay. I contacted him because I really liked one of his tracks and wanted to use it for a college short film. He graciously said yes, so when it came time to do Midlands, we had a different track of his in mind for this Ed scene. This led to Ed's musical identity being based around synthesizers. We'll talk about the character themes much later, but that was the groundwork for the final song of episode 1. I absolutely love how the track turned out. It's got such an air of mystery, but also introduces a low droning effect to ramp up the intensity in the latter half of the track.
Last chance.
Well, that's episode 1 wrapped up, and we're headed into the edit, which went as smooth as you could hope for on a project like this. Excluding all the other post-production elements like the sound, music, and grade, we're done. Skipping forward, let's talk about the pilot with the wider context of the whole show. It upsets me to say this, because at the time, it was the best thing that any of us had ever made. But looking back on it now, you can clearly see that we lacked experience. There's a lot of decisions on a technical level that I would have made differently, and tonally, it's the most off from the rest of the show. Not to say that it doesn't flow into the rest of the series, it's just the most overtly comedic. We weren't aware of the series' direction that we were going to take. Out of all the episodes, it's the one I'm least happy with. While it's not unanimous, I think most would agree it's the weakest episode of the series. And I have a sneaking suspicion that the humour might only land if you're from Ireland, or potentially the UK. I know this is probably the conceit of anyone who's ever made something, but I wish we could reshoot this episode with the skill that we have now. I'm proud of it, of course. It's scrappy and it's got a certain charm to it, but it's difficult not to be critical of work you made over 3 years ago. I shouldn't be so harsh. A lot of pilots feel different from the rest of their series, and we're no exception. The experience I gained from this was invaluable. At the time, it was the biggest production I'd ever worked on. It would serve as the initial dip into my style as a director that would inform how we create the rest of the episodes. And most importantly of all, it showed us that we wanted to keep making this series. This easily could have been a one and done with us moving on to different projects, but thankfully there was something there.
Come on, what say you? Have a bit of crack. Have a bit of crack, yeah?
Tristan. Yeah, give me a beer, man.
Will do, man. Will do.
If we're gonna make it all the way, it's gonna take a lot of work. Time to map out our plan to completion. The initial plan was 6 episodes, let's cut it down to 5. I'm gonna need to delegate some work. It's not feasible for me to do everything while I'm across every stage of production, and we need to map out the rest of the series. Let's see who in the crew would want to write an episode and hold a writer's room. The order was like this. Tristan would write episode 2, Kieran episode 3, Connor episode 4, and I'll write the finale. Later, Kieran would co-write episode 5 with me to take away some of the pressure. Let's figure out where the show should go. When starting the writer's room, I only had a vague idea of what I wanted for the rest of the series. It looked something like this. Episode 2 would have the Ed face reveal. For episode 3, I wanted an Ed-Seshika clash, along with revealing Ed's backstory. In episode 4, Ennis would join Ed's side, and in episode 5, we'd have Big Dirty Sesh, our red wedding leading to Ennis turning on Ed. We brainstormed a general plot, then each writer would draft the episode, send it to me for notes, and continue this process until we had a finalized version. One more thing. Initially, we had a vague idea to keep the episodes around 15 to 20 minutes in length. Let's scrap that. It's too many constraints, at least in the development process, and we can work things out if they need to be shortened. At the beginning, I wanted the morality of the show to be more grey. I wanted Ed to be the one in the right, but since we were framing him as the antagonist, you wouldn't realize that he was the lesser of two evils until Ennis joins him later in the series. The issue was, with a lower episode count, we wouldn't be able to fully execute that idea. If we had an 8 or 10 episode run, we could have made that work. I'd show how the council are just degenerate scumbag drug dealers, and while Ed's methods were extreme, he was in the right, making him more sympathetic as the show goes on. But we don't have the time or the resources to do that. Elements of that remain in this story, but to accommodate the lower episode count, we're gonna have to make Ed as evil as possible. But what could Ed do that's so evil that Ennis would turn on him? He would have just joined his side at the end of the previous episode. We brainstormed all manner of ridiculously evil things that Ed could do. None of them really fit. During that whole time, Kieran was screaming, "We need to shoot Canner in the fucking face!" And he's right. That's exactly what we needed to do. To quote the man, Canner was the closest thing this show had to a heart, so of course we had to rip it out. In our original plans, before we even shot episode 1, we noted that Canner was hiding something. This was meant to tie in with the grayer morality of the show. But since we adapted that, and with the way Tristan played the character, it was much more suited to anchor him as the emotional core. This way, we could give the betrayer role to a different character in the show, Max. I've often found that in group settings, people fear feeling stupid or saying the wrong thing. What I like to do when holding a brainstorming session is get a board or a piece of paper and have people yell out anything that comes to their mind, no matter how stupid. This usually starts with me saying a couple of dumb things to get the ball rolling. We use this method to figure out how the story would end for each of our characters. At this point, we're still a bit conflicted about the tone of the series. Most of us still saw it as a comedy and wanted the last scene to end with a joke, but Shane held out on that idea. We didn't have to decide right then though. We have a rough idea of how it's going to end, with the car ride back after the final fight with Ed. While all the scripts were in the line of production, episode 2 was the first we were going to film. It's around the end of November 2022 now, and we wanted to shoot sometime in March 23. Since Canner lived with me, we had time to develop the script together. Around that time, I had gone to a birthday party with Dr. Sinbad and some of our friends from that group. John, or Charlie McGrath in the series, not that his name is ever explicitly said, but he asked me if he could be in the next episode, and I couldn't have been happier. It was already a challenge getting this many people to join the show, and we were in dire need of a few more characters. So when John asked, I was more than happy to oblige. I asked him if he had any preference in being a villain or a part of the council, which he said he didn't. The next script writing session I had with Canner, we decided to introduce a new villain. That script chugs along, but there's one key difference that's holding the script back. Patter and Charlie's roles are reversed. So Jack and Patter go to disrupt the funeral, whereas Charlie goes and hunts down Ennis. Something felt off with this, and in hindsight the issue with that version of the script was twofold. Jack and Patter didn't have a solid conflict, and they were both looking for the same thing. We introduced a new villain that was immediately treated as a joke because he gets beaten up by the main character. We couldn't see those issues at the time, as it's hard to tell when just looking at it on paper. But we knew something was off. That's until we swapped Patter and Charlie's roles in the story and everything just fell into place. I found it interesting that just changing around two characters would solve all of our issues. Maybe the story isn't the problem, it's just which characters are where. We've got a longer script than episode 1 and the same amount of time to do it. That's already a tough challenge, but we get another curveball thrown our way. Seshka gets a job offer for 3 months in Portugal starting in late January. So we have to move up production to January instead of March, which in the end was a good thing for getting the show done, but stressful at the time. Regardless, let's power through. We've lost some crew members and cast members because of this, most notably the Tune Baron, who's in his final year of college and in exam season. That's a shame, but we'll make it work. The good news is we have Ewan, as well as his girlfriend Alex, joining us for this shoot. We've got a lot to power through in this one weekend. All over 3 days. One more wrench is thrown in the works. You know most of the stuff that we used to design the council room? Well, we borrowed it, and the person needed it only on the weekend that everyone was available to shoot. Panic mode. NSI have to run across Dublin City, grabbing everything that we can that'll moderately match what looked like in the council room. It's pretty close, but not exact. Hence this line.
He's everything fucking different as well, man. How long was he out?
Different? You're tripping fucking balls.
But in retrospect, you'd never know if we didn't draw attention to it. The line makes me laugh a lot though, so it's worth it in my mind. In the original set, there was a bunch of fairy lights. We went to get some for the shoot, but Christmas had just happened, so no one was selling them. Fortunately, one of my friends not on the shoot came in clutch and had a good few left over, along with whatever bits we could scrounge up in the local shops. Ennis and I headed down on Wednesday afternoon and set up the council room, along with my friends who provided the lights. Most of everyone else arrived the following night, as we're shooting Friday to Sunday this time. The next day we have 2 locations on the docket. 2 scenes in the lane, and every council scene bar the final one. Sinbad and the 2 bucket hat boys won't be there until after work, so we'll shoot around them being there. Okay, let's do a quick equipment check before we go to bed. We forgot the boom pole, fuck. Okay, it's a 40-minute drive one way. Thankfully, Canner has offered to go get it. We'll do his scenes in the morning, in the lane, then he'll run, go get it, and we'll shoot as much as we can without him. That puts us behind, but not as much as we expected. Only an hour or 2. The council scene filming goes relatively well. We've got extra time before Dr. Sinbad arrives, so we get this improvised interaction with Max and Canner, which is a great addition to set up his turn at the end of the episode.
No, he doesn't hate me. He did that because he loves me.
You see this shot here?
What the fuck is your problem? Fuck out of me way.
Well, that was originally supposed to be the Tune Baron. Ennis would have bumped into him, the Tune Baron would have said something in Polish, Ennis, frustrated, would say, "God, would you just speak English?" The Tune Baron would reply, "Fine, maybe I will." From that point on, he would just speak English for the rest of the show. Later, in the funeral scene, he'd get up and say, "This is a traditional Polish funeral song," and then just play a techno tune from the speaker. Not loads to do this episode, but it provided some comedic relief. It's a shame we never got to execute on those ideas, because while only speaking Polish is funny, it's repetitive. Shaking it up would have given him much more comedic range. Overall, the day didn't go too bad. It was a bit of a long one, only wrapping around 10 PM, but not the worst. That was the calm before the storm. With day 2, things got a lot more hectic. Our first stop was all the funeral scenes. Ennis's dad had worked as an undertaker previously, which meant we could get a real body bag for Dan. We found this great area, with the hill to prop the focal character on, and this circular ground surrounding it. It was great for blocking the scene. In case you weren't aware, blocking is just where you place your actors and cameras and how they move throughout the scene. Anyway, our characters throwing Dan's corpse over a tiny hill made us laugh a lot. It barely even made it over the hill. The body bag was filled with an unused duvet and a tripod, in case you were wondering. With all the improvisation that took place across the Midlands shoots, I had thought we didn't stick very closely to the script, with lines like,
I ultimately learned, do not invest in shitcoin. Logan Paul is lying to you.
but upon rereading the script for this video, it was a lot closer than I thought. Even some of the jokes were in the script.
Max, you would hurry on, it's fucking freezing.
I could have sworn that was improv because it was the middle of January. Some of the improv even kept the original intent while adding another layer to the scene. Take, for example, this sequence with Sinbad running away.
Oh, you don't want to scrap, I was trained by McGregor.
Dr. Rockapill, fucking...
Come on, man.
In the script, he swung for Charlie, missed, and fell to the ground, passing out. He's effectively out of the rest of the scenes in this location, but Kevin said, "What if I just ran away?" Which was fucking hilarious. It achieved the same effect of taking him out of the scene and solved another additional logistical problem of the audience asking, well, why don't they just run away? Sinbad answers that for you. They very easily could. They're all just too stupid or too lazy. Max the Trooper tanked the falling down joke instead. Since this scene was intercutting with the Ennis plotline, we realized on the day that there wasn't a great break point to cut to the other scene. Since Mad Jack was still a comedic villain at this point, I said we should have Jack scream,
And I have a few more things to say as well.
When we cut back to Jack, he would be rambling about something. Connor came out with a lot of funny options for us to use just off the cuff. In the edit, we settled on the Logan Paul joke. This presents an issue of dating a piece of work. Throughout all of Midlands, I think this line will probably age the worst. Even by its release in 2025, that reference is a bit dated. But I think that's what makes it funny. Mad Jack is the type of character that would go and invest in a crypto scam 3 years after it was exposed, not realizing it's a scam until it's too late. Even though it's still funny now, I think 10 or maybe 15 years down the line, it might feel out of place. I usually tend to avoid references in my writing. Here's a small thing we lost from page to screen. You see Mad Jack crossing out the notebook. Initially, we had a to-do list of Jack's written there, one of which was to get a new outfit. That's a reference to Charlie's introduction where he makes fun of Mad Jack's clothes, which is why he changes the color of his turtleneck. In practice, it didn't work. It just looked weird on camera, especially with the shakiness, and the pen was kind of hard to see. So we scrapped it, and it didn't make that much of a difference. While this was going on, Ennis, Canner, and one of our other friends, Tig, had set up the yurt, which was this little tent-like thing, as well as a fire pit for our following scene. We went over the allotted time for the funeral, so I asked John and Connor if they were okay going straight on to the next scene. Fortunately, they were happy to, and myself, Shane, Dan, and Ewan behind the camera are all absolute nutcases, and we're more than okay to keep going. There was a great feeling of camaraderie going from this scene to the next. I knew we were going to need more time to get the scene done, meaning we'd have to skip lunch. Ennis and Canner went back to the gaff and made sandwiches for the people who were still working, just to keep us alive. Even though Ennis and Canner were part of the driving force to get Midlands made, it wasn't beneath them to get some food for the crew to keep going. That's when I knew we were going to get the whole series done. Whatever it takes. Everything goes great with this scene, apart from one thing. The fake knife we got looked absolutely terrible. That wasn't a difficult fix. John just hid the knife behind Connor's back instead of up to his throat like I wanted. Not a major loss, and we dropped a line of exposition while shooting. It was about how Charlie knew Ed. It went roughly, "Oh, Ed from prison? Yeah, of course, what does he need?" But in practice, that line was awkward and stilted. It was a mostly useless piece of exposition anyway, so it had to go. Sometimes that sort of stuff happens. It's usually better to record those lines and remove them in the edit. But because of how the scene was structured, we had to drop it while recording. A big thing I learned from this scene is not to call cut too early. You see them walking away here? I wish I had a couple more seconds of that just to hold on. But alas, it's a lesson. Don't call cut too early. That's 2 out of 3 scenes done. We break for dinner and then move on to the final scene of the day, which is the ending council scene. There's surprisingly not too much to say about this shooting wise. Let's talk about one of my pet peeves. You see this kick here? You see the way it looks fake? Well, it's real. The take we used, Ennis accidentally hit Canner pushing him out. He was even winded afterwards. But it still looks so fake. God, it's frustrating. Even things that happen for real don't always look good on camera. Ewan was the editor for episode 2, and he had a great idea for resequencing the ending. In the script, when Seshika says,
Hold on. Are you fucking serious?
some of the characters were meant to respond to her, but Ewan used the quiet as the reaction to Seshika, which made it much more powerful. All those lines were moved to after Ennis says something, which puts a focus on Seshika losing power, setting up our conflict for episode 3. Another small thing we lost was with the Wall of the Fallen. I wanted to linger on Ed's poster as the last shot to lead into the next scene into the Ed face reveal. It didn't flow in the edit. Ending on Seshika instead was better as it focused on the character conflict rather than the reveal. The following scene works regardless of that shot. We finished quite late. A lot of people went home as we only needed a smaller crew for tomorrow. And that was the toughest shoot day behind us. It's day 3, and there's still a lot left to get through. We start with Patter harassing Ennis at work. It took us a few takes to get going, but we find our rhythm. Patter driving at the end always makes me laugh. This isn't an issue when watching the show, but in real life, the direction he drives is a dead end. It's not even a run up to turn around, it's literally just 50 meters. You do see it in episode 1, although only briefly. Goes to show that spatial awareness doesn't matter in film. Next is the ending scene, which is one of my favorite scenes in the whole show. One of the elements that elevate this scene is the animalistic way Ed beats down Patter, shifting back and forth like a feral ape. This was a suggestion from Ennis. We filled bin bags with a bunch of duvets and stood the camera under it while I hit the bags. Mad Jack is great in this scene as well. Not being able to let go of his past led him to make too many mistakes. He was in way over his head with a bad crowd. The scream he lets out just before the camera pans up is so guttural. The ambiguity of what happens to Jack is part of the charm as well. Is he dead? Did he just lose an eye? You're not supposed to know. And it's aided by the fact that you don't see him in episode 3 at all, apart from in the flashback. This is usually where people lock into the series. If they make it to this scene, they're going to finish it. That's a high point for me for sure, but we've got 2 critical errors coming up. Before that, we have this scene with Patter and Jack. This only took a few takes, and we did it all in one shot. After that, we have the Ennis and Patter fight scene, and that was a fucking mess. The fight scene we have in the released version of Midlands is great. I love it a lot. On the first shoot, we had an hour. You can't film a fight scene with that little time. That's one disaster. But disaster 2, the opening scene with Ed, Patter, and Jack. We didn't intend to shoot in this location. Hence this line.
You don't think it's a bit much, do you? Shut the fuck up.
We planned to shoot it in a study that had a window that we could use to silhouette Ed. That would have given me much more room to play with in the scene. But that setup takes time. Time we didn't have. Along with the location we planned being an hour's drive away. It just wasn't feasible. We settled with the oratory, which was nearby. But as the scene played out, it didn't fit with Ed as a character. In the initial version, I was pacing, I talked a lot more, and it gave away the mystery and danger surrounding the character. It was just misplaced. This scene was about Jack and Patter anyway, it should focus on them instead of Ed. Our third and final disaster, we never shot the speech that happens midway through the episode. For the life of me, I couldn't remember why. I talked to everyone from the cast and crew that was there, and they couldn't remember either, until I talked to Connor. Since we had already slotted the opening for episode 2 for a future date, we could also film my speech then. We were so low on time that it was the only way it could work. It's a bit of a disaster overall, but the disasters don't end there, as we're about to talk about my least favorite part of Midlands. It's March, and we have a rough cut for what we have for episode 2, and it's time for pickups and reshoots. Here's the things on the docket. We have the opening montage, the Ed Patter Jack scene, the speech, and the fight scene. We've gotten some new toys. These RGB tube lights, and we put them to great use in the montage. We've got a general outline and a temp track, otherwise we just filmed a lot of options and let it get figured out in the edit. Ewan, who had mostly done music videos by this point, did an excellent job cutting up that montage. We shot this in the evening we came up and had everything else scheduled for the next day, which is where another disaster strikes. We forgot our XLR cable. That's the cable that connects the mic to the sound recorder. Fuck, how does this keep happening? To make it even worse, we know from last time there aren't any film shops in Westmeath. We check Google anyway, and there's a business close by called Druid Stringed Instruments. We ring them and ask if they have any XLR cables for sale. He says he doesn't, but we can have a lend of one. God bless you, Druid Stringed Instruments. Your special thanks is well deserved. While Connor and Dan are cruising out to get the cable, myself, Ennis, and Sean block out the fight scene. I want it in 2 stages. The first part where Sean is winning the fight, then we cut away to whatever's going on with Mad Jack, and then the second part where Ennis eventually wins. It looks difficult to pull off and involves some rolling around in the grass, but Ennis and Sean are happy to do it. But first, the 2 oratory scenes. And there's another complication. I'm so fucking sick. I'm very prone to sinus infections, and when I get sick like that, I can't do the Ed voice right.
I want him alive.
Which is why I'm doing this growly Christian Bale Batman voice. It's literally the only way I could do anything close to how Ed sounds. I didn't have any way of showing range because of this delivery method. And for all those reasons, I hate this scene. This is the type of situation where I'm hypercritical of my own performance, purely because it's me. I've had Dan say to me that this scene is okay, because like I said, the focus is on Patter and Jack, not Ed. And the phone filter gives my lines a bit of variety as well. It's just difficult not to be harsh about your own performance. Okay, we're over that nightmare. Let's move on to the fight. And as if some divine entity wanted to strike us down, it started snowing. In the middle of fucking March. That means the fields won't match. So we'll have to angle the camera to avoid this. When Patter first shows up, Ennis's hands are too shaky, and he can't roll a smoke. In the script, before Connor gets knocked out, we'd call back to this by Ennis's hands no longer shaking while rolling. It was going to show that he was falling into bad habits, life was easy and natural for him, whereas when he was trying to do the right thing, he was struggling. But we had to lose it. Not a major deal, just a little bit sad. But the bigger problem is we can't do any of our plan. It involved going to the ground and rolling, which won't make sense if there's snow. We've got to raw dog it and just come up with shit on the spot. That led to us missing out on the setup of Patter coming in and taking out Canner, like how he got there. It's okay, I just wish we could have done more with it. Shane executed a bunch of cool zooms on impacts in the fight scene, which gave it amazing energy. But we encountered two problems when we got to the edit. Problem number one, this cut just doesn't work. Not a big deal, we just need a pickup. Which is this shot of Ennis's head that we got on one of the episode 5 shoots. And now the fight is great. There's a second problem though. The fight is too short to split up. Remember how I was going to intercut the fight between the Mad Jack plotline? If we did that, it would be 5 seconds of fight scene each, and it wouldn't work. So we kept the entire fight all in one scene. This led to the only deleted scene in Midlands, Ennis breaking down in the car. To be honest, I don't really mind losing it. I think the episode is paced much better without it, and it doesn't really serve much purpose for character building. It only repeats stuff the audience already knows. That's one of 2 major disasters throughout the entire series. But there's a bigger, even more stupid one coming later. At least we managed to get episode 2 finished, and I think we're getting there. There's a lot of great moments and a couple banger scenes. For a while, episode 2 was my least favorite episode. But Max told me that he's an episode 2 truther, and eventually my opinion was swung. I think the primary reason for my low rating of 2 was the Ed scenes that I expressed frustration with. I'd like these scenes way more if we had shot them in a different location, and I wasn't sick. But hey, what can you do? You have to deal with the wins and the losses. The major success was knowing that we were going to make it all the way. I had no idea the amount of time that would take, but I knew we could.
Alright, who's ready for a game of fucking kings, huh?
Now that the ball is rolling, let's fix our biggest issue from the first 2 episodes. Timekeeping. Instead of trying to fit everything into one weekend, why don't we just split up the shoots? In hindsight, that's so obvious. With the extra time, of course the last 3 episodes are a higher quality. If only we split the recording of episode 2 across 2 weekends. Every scene with Seshika in one block, and the rest a month later. We would have been golden. At least that's what I thought for a while, but I don't know if we had enough momentum behind us to split up the shoots. The first 2 episodes proved to us that we could get it done even with a tight schedule. But to continue our production, we had to shoot out of order. Since Jess was out of the country for a while, episode 4 was next on the docket. The script development goes well. It only takes a couple of redrafts, and then I'm happy to put it into production. It's March 2023, and we should refer to these shooting blocks by their shorthand. We'll call this the forest section. Lloyd, or as you may know him, Felix the Priest, joins the crew here. Let's shoot our first scene, Ennis waking up in Ed's kitchen. Shit, we forgot Ennis's jacket. Okay, not the greatest omen, but we'll roll with it. The thing that sticks out in my mind is these forward-facing perspective shots. It gave Ed a level of creepiness and unease that Ennis, and by extension the audience, should have, since this is their first meeting. At the time, I was inspired by 2 things. 1. Lloyd's grad film. He also used that perspective frequently. And 2. Resident Evil 7. I was playing it at the time, and it influenced the semi-horror feel to these shots. This episode leans into a horror aesthetic, and that will be more overt later. We planned on shooting the final speech in the back garden from where we shot the kitchen scene. But the mic is picking up all the cars. The road is too close. We tried it for a couple of takes, but it's a no-go. An idea pops into my mind. What about the lake? That turns out to be a double whammy. I said at the time that if we commit to the lake, it has to be integral to Ed's backstory, or else why would he keep coming there? Skipping ahead a little bit, that location is where Ed's origin story occurs. We head out there and the stars align. The sun perfectly lines the lake, making these shots gorgeous. Along with that, it's quiet. We're the only people there. Because everything looked so picturesque, we decided to use a different lens. A 50mm lens to be exact, with an f1.8 aperture. I won't bore you with a bunch of technical stuff about the camera, but it creates this lovely thrown out background. Unfortunately, with this specific lens we were using, it was hard to keep it in focus. We drew heavy inspiration from this scene between Mike and Gus in Better Call Saul, down to the symbolism of the water and this line.
It seems to me that you are at a crossroads. You can continue as you are, drinking, estranged from your family, brawling with street hoods. We both know how that ends.
As far as I see it, you have two choices. Stay as you are, drinking, fighting, wasting your potential.
Which I insisted we added. This was always my concept for this scene. Fortunately, the symbolism fell into place because of our location. You see, it's interesting directing a script you haven't written. And while I still had final say, it's cool seeing the different directions a writer will take a piece of work. Had I have written this scene, it probably would have been much more confrontational, like the Mike and Gus scene. But Connor took it in another direction. Also, it was quite fun to perform this big unbroken monologue. Anyway, it's day 2 and Max has arrived, thankfully with Ennis's jacket. Prior to the shoot, we had to source some military gear. Fortunately, a friend of ours is a collector, so that was sorted easy peasy. We put Max in the full costume, except with some swim shorts, just because we thought it was funny. Off to the forest we go, and we shoot in chronological order. We had set the improvisational tone from the previous 2 episodes, which gave Max the freedom to take this scene in a different direction from what's on page. In writing, Max was innocent and childlike. On screen, Max was creepy and overbearing. That was a golden choice by Max, and it makes this the funniest scene in the show.
The doctor said I don't have much time left. The amount of steroids and poppers I'm on, I'm gonna shit my guts out, and it's not gonna be a pretty.
It's what you want.
This is one of the most invaluable lessons I learned on Midlands, that you have to trust your actors. There is a world where I could have been rigid and made Max stick to the way it was written, with the initial tone that I interpreted from the script. And it would have been worse for it. I can imagine a scenario where you're on your first short film, or even your first big project. That's your baby, and you can't part ways with how you pictured it in your head. You force your actors to do it the way that you intended, and look, there's times where you do have to push for your way. I'm not saying that's wrong. But enabling your cast and crew to put forward their ideas and make their mark on a project not only gets the best work out of them, but it gives them motivation because they're making a significant input. There was adaptation required for this. Ennis had wordier responses to Max, and it wasn't really working. We had to boil it down to its basic elements. What would Ennis's reaction be to this scenario? Well, he'd probably just be confused, annoyed, and barely able to focus because of all the nonsense that Max was saying. Let's roll with that. Let's make Ennis act like he has no idea what's going on. It's a tried and tested comedic formula of having a straight man to another character's wild hijinks. The consequence of this adaptation, however, is that this shot holds the record for the most takes in all of Midlands, at 13. It took us a while to find our groove for that one. Fortunately, now with the extra time, we're able to play around with the material. We're trucking along with the rest of the forest scenes. One thing though, our fake blood looks awful. Thank God Max played into it. As if his character put it there. The montage went well. We had a solid temp track in mind, which made it very easy to cut. There was a very smart decision made by Shane, who edited this episode, and that was this flashing effect. None of our falls looked particularly good, mostly because we had to have Ennis fall in this awkward upright position. So the jolty flashing effect was used to hide that fall. Our day isn't over. When we make it back to the house, we break for dinner, and Canner, who was needed for the dream sequence, came up after work. It was a bit of a trek for him, but we're getting it done. I love the lighting in this scene. The deep orange beam behind Canner and the green room gives it this uncanny feel. This is where we reuse the location from Canner's gaff from episode 1, but now the vibe of the room is a much better fit. Scuffed decision from our part in episode 1 gets a callback and rectified in this episode. Cool. A shot I really wanted to get is a dolly zoom. You might know it from this scene. I tried to get it on Ennis here, but we just didn't have the tech for it. Maybe on the next project. Day 3 went smooth. There's this cool shot that we didn't get to use because it wouldn't have made much sense. Why would Max need to drug Ennis? Why was Ed just waiting in the house the whole time? So we cut it, but it looked cool. This scene makes me piss myself every time I see it.
I swear I left it somewhere. Oh, where are the beers? And I'm certain there was some vodka here just a few moments ago. Oh, where's my Pinot? Christ, I can't find it anywhere.
I think it's that Max's character had no reason to do this. He's just taunting Ennis for the sake of taunting him. He's being evil for fun, and I think that's super funny. We had to add this shot of Max taking Ennis's jacket for the continuity to work. It was supposed to be ambiguous about whether or not the candles around Ennis were real, but because we forgot the jacket, I guess Max just put them all around him. Not really out of character, but it just doesn't matter. It's April 23rd, and it's time for the Mad Jack plotline, which we call the Kilkenny section because of where we shot it. We sourced this great location, an old country house. It's gonna require some setup though. Jess, Ennis, and Shane agree to head up 2 days before and stay with Connor as he lives nearby. Jess takes the lead with the set design, and they get the location ready. 2 days later, myself, Dan, and Fergal head up, and the shoot's underway. We could get some complex shots because of our longer shooting blocks. We applied a stabilization effect on the opening crawl up the stairs, which unintentionally caused a pulse each time Mad Jack breathes. Super cool. I've been thinking that we should have shot this at nighttime, and I'm not sure why we didn't. It's likely something to do with it being a oneer and it being too difficult to hide the lights. Anyway, our next shot was this section, which stitches together with the last granny scene, which we'll talk about when we get to day 3. The last ever thing we reshot comes here. When we got the first cutaway of the letter, it didn't match the lighting. So getting a reshoot was no issue because we can shoot the letter anywhere. The execution of this scene presented an issue. How does Mad Jack notice the letter? Would it be on the ground when he arrives? That's not very dramatic. Well, that was solved for us when we arrived at the location. Letters were positioned on the left where they were in the shot. All we had to do was add our letter and have Jack crash into it, which was more difficult than it looks. On to our final shot of the day. We got this new piece of kit called a jib. It's basically a mini crane that does similar shots on a much smaller scale. Here's the thing about the one we got. It was cheap. That meant it couldn't support the weight of the camera by itself, and we had to counterbalance it by taping a bunch of water bottles to the opposite side. The camera was attached to this piece of tech called a gimbal. To save all the boring tech discussion, we had 2 ways to move the camera. One with the gimbal and one with the jib. Fergal had to operate the gimbal remotely with a phone, and Shane was operating the jib. The phone operation had some shoddy latency, and we couldn't transmit to the monitor because of this setup. We'd have to review after each take, which totaled to 11. Think that's our second highest take counter. Fun fact, Shane lost his wallet for ages because we wanted to fill this drawer to make it feel lived in. So we put his wallet there and completely forgot until a month later. It's day 2, and we're opening with Mad Jack standing up to Ed while hallucinating. But the school next door has music playing. On a Sunday? It makes the filming a bit stop and start, but otherwise no issues. We got a version where Connor is monologuing to no one. It took us a take to realize this was idiotic. It's hilarious watching over it, but it's unusable. It undermines the scene completely, giving the reveal away so soon. Next is a section we trimmed heavily in the edit. Mad Jack makes a call to Seshika and then he suits up, heading towards Big Dirty Sesh. There was a TikTok I saw a while ago that says shows will often write more explanatory dialogue for scenes and will cut them down in the editing process. It's always better to have the option to explain things than not have enough and leave the audience confused. This mantra occurred with this scene and a council scene from this episode. Mad Jack went on an extended rant to Seshika, but once we got to the edit, it slowed the pace down too much. The episode was going to end a scene from now chronologically. It's repeated information that was told succinctly enough with the way it's cut in the episode. After the phone call, Mad Jack would suit up in this Edgar Wright style montage. It had the same issues, so we cut it. The shorter the better. We always wanted to show Mad Jack's eye cut to pieces, but that was a bit out of our budget and technical skill. As it turns out, the eye cover soaked in dry blood looks great, and if you're not paying too close attention, it could even be his eye. Then we had our final sequence of the night, which was split across 2 scenes. The TV and the ghost hall. There was a couple of costumes lying around, a raincoat and this older jacket, which we were allowed to use for the shoot. We shot Fergal and Dan on a green screen and let them go mental.
It was you! You fucking decrepit piece of shit!
We had brought this CRT TV with an adapter that I could hook my laptop up to. We looked through a list of public domain films, and Attack of the Giant Leeches is the one that we landed on. Not out of place for Mad Jack to be watching. We stitched together the video on the laptop, and I was lying on the ground slightly out of view, hitting play whenever we wanted to start a take. Little side note, the green screen background for Dan and Ferg had to be white to properly cut them out. This was our first time working with a green screen, but that color limitation worked in our favor. While watching the film, Mad Jack is encased in darkness, and then he's hit with a beam of white light. I enjoyed how this scene straddles the line between horror and comedy. Some of the stuff they say is ridiculous, but it's played and presented in a creepy way to balance it out. Initially, we were planning to have a track playing during this scene, but it pushed it too far in the horror direction. Then it's the ghost hall. We wanted other people to play the ghosts, but the availability didn't work out. The solution was to have Connor wear the costumes that Dan and Ferg just wore along with Ed's. That part worked out well, but an aspect I hate about this scene, and some of the other scenes in the show, are the whip pans. There was a practical need for them because of the tight hallway we shot in, but now that we've completed the series, there's only one whip pan I like in the entire show, and that's in episode 5. Okay, what is a whip pan? It's when you start one shot, quickly turn the camera, and then start the next shot with the same motion. Here's the issue I have with them. Ironically, they feel too slow. What I should have done is had the actor in motion before the camera turns, rather than when the camera lands. I suppose that's the purpose of this project, right? To learn things like this. But we aren't done with the whip pans yet. There's a much worse section in episode 3. We wrapped rather late today because we needed darkness, but regardless, we're moving on to the final day. The whole day was dedicated to the Madeline scenes. She's played by Max's real-life granny, Maureen. She's the reason that Max got into acting, which is a lovely story. Regardless, it was a lifesaver and made the whole process a lot smoother. Max came along for the last day of shooting, but we still had to be extra prepared. This was a massive favor, and we wanted to make sure that we had absolutely everything we needed, so we didn't have to do any reshoots, ADR, anything like that. I had never worked with an older actress before. The series was constructed to use what we had available to us, hence everyone in the cast being around my age. With that, I wasn't sure what sort of energy level an older actress would have. The way I decided to shoot it was flipping between Madeline and Mad Jack's coverage. This even worked in a thematic sense. Since Madeline isn't real in the context of the story, having Connor act against nothing while we gave Maureen a break reinforced what we were going for. Trying to avoid reshoots and ADR, I got Maureen to read all the lines off camera just in case. I got a bunch of different reactions from Maureen outside of the scene. That's something I like to do a lot when shooting bigger scenes like the council meeting. Since you can't know for sure what you'll need when it comes to the edit, having those reaction shots are great in case you need some coverage. At this point, our makeshift dolly had run its course, and it was in a pretty dire shape. Anytime we moved it, it would make a loud screech, which of course was a no-go for audio. Because of that, we used these long, unbroken shots on Mad Jack for his monologues about his mental state. That's another happy accident that worked out for the better. Any sort of movement would have given a far different vibe to this scene. I think it works that you feel boxed in with Mad Jack. It really puts you in his mindset. Secondly, every time I watch this scene, I see we fucked the eyeline here. No major story behind that one, it was just a blunt mistake, and it annoys me every time I see it. Tef cooked up this lovely guitar piece that you hear throughout this sequence. It needed to be sinister for when Madeline starts cursing out Mad Jack. I was watching season 1 of Gen V at the time, and spoiler alert, when Homelander shows up at the end, it plays a version of the Superman theme that goes out of key as he lands. I suggested the same for this. With each of Madeline's insults, the guitar goes out of key, making the music reflect the story. Overall, it was quite a smooth shoot. We had to run long on the second day, but we were really finding our groove. There was a scene in the script that never made it to screen. Near the end of the episode, Mad Jack would pay his respects to Patter's grave, who he buried in the back garden. A lovely scene, and it was beautifully written, but reading it, I knew it couldn't fit in the episode. Sometimes you've got to kill your darlings. Let's time jump all the way to August, and it's my birthday. Woo! Another big woo, Seshika is back from Portugal. Let's wrap up episode 4 with all the council scenes. During this shoot, we shot some of episode 3 and some of episode 4. It was mostly 3 on the first day and 4 on the second. We'll come back to 3 shortly, but disaster strikes before we even start shooting. Mickey, aka the Tune Baron, came for the shoot. The morning of, his car started making some weird noises, and he had to take it to the mechanic. So we lost him, which is sad, but shit happens. That's not our only problem though. We're having some sound issues. It's unfortunate because Dan, who's been handling our sound mostly, isn't on this shoot. There's crackling coming in and out of the mic, and we couldn't fix it. Since it was a regular, we decided to roll with it, and this would have massive consequences down the line. Max is only available for 1 day, so we've organized it to shoot his stuff on the first day, which is the opening council scene. This scene was also guilty of having too much in it. There's a whole extended sequence with everyone cheering for Ennis, which feels culty. Intentionally, of course. But it was too long, and it didn't fit. We got a quick shot of Max for the end of episode montage, and then moved on to the Kanna and Seshika scenes. They were over both days, but it's best to talk about them in bulk. The main thematic purpose of the council scenes in this episode is to show the degradation of the council. You, like Ennis, are supposed to feel that this place isn't the way it was before. Previously it was fun and safe, but now you see it for how it is, ugly and disgusting, leading the viewer to be more receptive of Ennis joining Ed's side. I wish I harped on this a bit more in the episode. As it stands, I don't think it's pronounced enough. The I'm Not Dead sequence is the most overt horror section in this entire show. I was incredibly impressed by the execution of this scene by the cast, nailing the horror but still having that slight element of comedy. Something hilarious that came out of this scene is when Gareth is saying I. When I received a version of the sound mix much later on, an error had occurred, and for this whole scene it was just Gareth saying I on repeat, and it kept getting louder without anything else in the soundscape. Anytime I see this scene, that's all I can picture. Another funny thing, Ennis was trying different reactions to seeing his dead body, and Shane said do the choral scene from Walking Dead. It fits so well, but I can't help but laughing every time I see him do it. Then for the final scene in this block, the Mad Jack Ennis hallucination. We had 2 potential paths to execute this scene. It was supposed to show Ennis's worst qualities. His violent side, that he wants to let out his demons and just beat his enemies to death. Bit of foreshadowing, but our issue was Ennis had only seen goofy Mad Jack and not punished Mad Jack as we were calling him. Meaning we had to play Mad Jack a bit silly. I was leaning on the side of making this scene far more serious, but I was convinced towards the jokey version. Was this the right decision? I'm not sure, but it wasn't a wrong decision.
I'm talking about you, you crazy Dutch bastard.
That's episode 4 wrapped, except there's some big problems in the edit. The script read beautifully and flowed amazing, but it was off in post. Scenes dragged, and I don't mean that scenes are long, that's fine. The pacing just wasn't there. That's fixable though, and here's how. I made a little document that had all the scenes, color-coded based on which of the 3 main characters were in them. Ennis, Mad Jack, and Seshika. Their colors were combined if they were in a scene together. Then I messed around with the order of the scenes until it felt natural and the flow came back. When I was done, I showed it to Shane and he got to work. The first change was to split the initial Ennis-Jess council scene into 2 segments. Before it was long, like really long. Not only was it a near 4-minute scene, but it still had that extended cult-like sequence that I talked about before. Secondly, 2 Mad Jack scenes are combined. His morning routine and Madeline's first entrance. Then follows the forest scene. That's 3 scenes in a row that are anywhere from 2 minutes 30 seconds to nearly 4 minutes. After that, we have a Seshika council scene much earlier compared to the final cut, followed by the second half of the forest sequence with Ennis. Then back to Mad Jack and his granny, which would lead us to intercutting between the Ennis and Jack scenes as the tension ramped up. This was invaluable experience for editing on a broader conceptual scale. A lot of Hollywood films, to my knowledge, have much longer first cuts, with a bunch of additional scenes compared to their final edits. The technical term for these would be assembly cuts. I didn't think we'd make an episode that had that level of play in the editing room, but here we are. What Connor was going for in the script was Ennis and Jack experiencing their hallucinations side by side. In practice, the flow was off. It went from peak to peak, without letting the audience rest. Whereas in the final cut, it balances the peaks and troughs of excitement. Have you ever wondered why Oppenheimer felt so fast-paced, even though it's mostly people talking? Why I think that is because each of the individual scenes are short. Applying this idea to Midlands, chopping up the opening council scene and the second Mad Jack scene made the pacing feel much lighter and more free-flowing. Being stuck in one location can work as a viewer depending on what you're going for, but in this instance, it felt far too slow, especially for what we had established already as the show's pacing. This had a ripple effect for the midsection of the episode. In the script, Ennis and Jack were in the pits of their hallucination at the same time, but in the final version, it would swap between whether Jack or Ennis was in danger in any given scene, peaks and troughs. There was some stuff near the end that we had to chop up. Of course, there was the Jack Seshika phone call, which became foreshadowing for a scene in episode 5 unintentionally. Then there's the suit-up section. As I mentioned, we cut that down. But what I didn't mention is the suit-up was a part of the ending montage for that episode. That didn't fit. It felt out of place, coming straight after a long and serious scene with Ed and Ennis at the lake. And the other montage elements weren't long enough to contrast it. Let's fix that ending montage. First, we'll cut it down to one shot of Jack leaving the house. Max returning to the council is fine, and Ennis looking up is good, but it's missing something. Time for some pickups and reshoots. By this point, we're shooting episode 5, and we know Ed gets a gun. Let's have Charlie acquire one from an arms dealer. I'll have more to say about firearms in Irish media later. One more thing to add to the reshoot list: the council scene. Ennis's dialogue doesn't make much sense contrasted with what Seshika is saying.
The little fucker ran. I know he did. I battered him so bad he doesn't know his arse from his elbow.
This is a consequence of the scripts being written at the same time. When filming, it felt natural, and made more sense because we were shooting out of order. His dialogue had a focus on Mad Jack, and since he was the primary antagonist in episode 2, it all made sense to us. But when watching, while we had a full cut of episode 3 and 4, it felt out of place. What was he talking about? Mad Jack hasn't been around for an entire episode. Fortunately, Seshika's dialogue could all stay the same, and we replaced what Ennis said to be more centered on Ed, since Ed was the focus of episode 3.
Alright, fine. What do you want me to do about it?
End this.
Episode 4 is when we really hit our stride. Everything felt a lot smoother, and a part of that is the extra time we had. When we've got experience from the first 2 episodes, and we're not rushing from scene to scene, things just seem to click. That's not to say there weren't issues, as there always are. But I felt like our skills were developing now in different areas to make our filmmaking toolset more robust. Another thing that really made this episode click was the color grade, music, and especially the sound mix. Those things improve every episode, but this one benefited the most from the combination of the 3. I think that's because of the horror inspiration and atmospheric sound design that Dan did. Like, for example, when the camera whips here, Dan used a breath, put through some filters to give this scene an ominous effect.
I'm never gonna see my friends again.
If I listed all the cool sound design things here, we'd be here all day. By this point, we've already shot some of episode 3 with our split shoot. 1.5 scenes to be specific. Seshika at the board with Emma, and the whole ending council sequence. There isn't much to comment on with the first part, although due to Max's availability, we had to replace the reverse when we got the rest of the scene, leading us to leave this gem on the cutting room floor.
Yeah, there's my big boy. Yeah, Ennis, you're my little
big boy.
But here it is, the whip pan scene that frustrates me to no end. I think this scene only annoys me and potentially Dan. We spent ages in the mix trying to get this scene to work. What I should have done is said no when whip pans were suggested and shot it with traditional coverage on each person. When it came to the edit, the whips were too intrinsic in how the scene was constructed, meaning we couldn't cut them out. But they weren't executed well enough by me to have the desired effect. If you don't like what you have, there's no room to experiment in the edit. Like I said before, ideally the actors should be saying each of their lines before the camera even starts moving. We're stuck with some of the scene feeling awkward to me. Well, you live and you learn. At least the ending with Seshika walking away works great with the song. It just so happens that most people are available 2 weeks later. There's some miscommunication about the timing, leading some to be late. What do you do when your shoot is delayed? Well, the only thing you can do is rehearsing or blocking. This sort of stuff will happen, especially if you're shooting with your friends. Cars can break down, people can get delayed, or any number of things. What you've got to do is work with who and what you have at the time. In my case, I had a lot of the main actors, so we got to play around with the script and test potentially funnier ways to deliver the dialogue. Back to the shoot. We have our introduction to Lloyd as a cast member as Felix the priest. Fun fact, Felix wasn't initially going to be a priest, Ennis just said that it would be funny and ordered a priest costume. I agree, it was funny and it made Felix a distinct character. Also, this is one of the 2 times that Dr. Sinbad's actor Kev broke because of how ridiculous his line was.
Jeez, yeah, no, there was one time I lost my keys in my
Kieran, who wrote this episode, included a great callback to episode 1. This improvised line.
Oh, Caligula, that prick fucking owes me a $5, that lad.
That was a great gag to continue. But the photo of Caligula was a friend of ours from another country. So we asked around the Midlands crew if anyone knew someone who looked similar to the photo and would be interested in playing the role. That's when Connor said his friend Rob would do it. I absolutely love how Rob plays this character, doing the ridiculous posh country boy. Another thing I love about this character is that everyone fucking hates Caligula. 3 of the council are instantly set to hostile, and it has absolutely nothing to do with finding out who Ed is. They literally can't do anything right. Anyway, final scene of the day, and it's the opening of the episode. There's this cool tracking shot that gets mirrored at the end of the episode with our newest piece of tech, a wheelchair. Yes, seriously. Our dolly was done in by this point, so this is our replacement. God, I want a real dolly. Overall, this scene went well. Most people head home after shooting, and tomorrow should be a relatively short day. Or so I thought. There's 2 scenes. First, Seshika's monologue to Kieran. The performance in this scene is great, and Jessica is able to replicate her movements exactly in each take. The audio for this scene will cause tons of grief when we get to post, but that's much later down the line. There's an amazing musical blend here, going between this scene and the confrontation with Ed. Seshika's theme is playing throughout, and hits a crescendo where she figures out where Ed would be. But when she goes there, her theme blends into Ed's.
I think you should stay here.
More to come on the themes later, but here's where our major issue appears. We get to our beloved lake. We've shot here a few times and there hasn't been anyone there. And we were always out on a sunny day. But it's Sunday today, and even though it's rainy and windy, for some reason, tons of people are out on boats. This is what we've dubbed amongst the Midlands crew as National Boating Day. You see these shots here? There's like a minimum of 3 boats just out of shot. It's never been this busy, ever, and it's a fucking terrible day. I can't fathom why there'd be so many people here. And I'm pissed. I'm like so angry. I wanted to play this scene with a bit more tact and only build up to the anger, but because of the boating situation, I'm at like a 10 anger level. There's a massive fucking banana boat just off to my right. Okay, I just relived the scene for a moment. I'm thankful that the people who were out there were also happy to be quiet when we recorded and only move around between takes. The scene turned out great as well. It's Jess's personal favorite, and I love the scene. It just goes to show that even if you scout a location, there can still be issues. Fast forward to October and we've gotten to the flashbacks. First, we need some pickups from our previous scenes. Since we'll all have to shave for the flashback, we've hatched a plan. Get everything we need in the council room the night before, then shave our beards when we're done. How else are we going to make ourselves look younger? That goes off without a hitch, and now we all look like children. We start the day with the Felix Ennis drinking competition. The guys got to play around with the scene and found a rhythm that works. I love this shot where Felix is looking around for another person. It always makes me laugh. Then there's the young Ed and Seshika scene. It's weird playing such a normal version of this character. I was trying to emulate a younger me. I did initially approach this scene trying to have a more improv-y, natural feel to it. I thought it would be a good idea to only have a general idea of what my lines were and not know them off by heart so I could play around with the material. That was a fucking mistake. It took me a few takes to get going, but once that was out of the way, everything went smoothly. Next, we have one of the two scenes that absolutely kills the vibe at the function. It's the Ed arrest scene. One of the strongest elements of this scene was the technical choice to use the Snorri cam. By the way, that piece of tech is incredibly heavy. But it allowed us to do two things. It locked you into the harrowing experience with Ed and helped us avoid showing any police. I did investigate getting some Garda costumes, which are the Irish police, by the way. As it turns out, you have to contact the Garda press office to get contemporary uniforms. Makes sense, you wouldn't want someone impersonating a guard. Which I did try for a later scene in episode 5, but overall the logistics were too messy. A thing to note with the Snorri cam is it's quite difficult to do audio, especially if someone's running. We used the camera's internal mic and Dan put a bunch of echoes and sound effects to ramp up the intensity as well as cover the sound difference. A skill I didn't know I had was being able to cry on command. It's a skill I'll probably never use again. I want to sidebar here and talk about things to avoid when working with your actors. Since I'm confident with my performance in this scene, I think it's important to share this story if it'll help any upcoming filmmakers. There was a person on the earlier episodes of Midlands that would say mine, and then eventually Ennis's acting was shit. This person was joking around, even though it didn't come across like it. I was trying to be strong and not ruin the vibes of the shoot, especially when they thought they were just taking the piss. But once the joke was directed at someone other than me, I had to say something. I took this person aside and explained to them that acting is a confidence thing, and even if things are intended as jokes, it can really mess with someone's ability to perform. Fortunately, Ennis had the personality type to want to prove someone wrong when they said that. But I would be lying if I said it didn't get to me. The only reason that I managed to get my confidence back was my performance in the lake in episode 4. I was happy, and I got a strong reaction from the crew there, which managed to keep me going. The most important thing for an actor is confidence, and that might be why there's the commonly held opinion that actors are full of themselves. Because to get the most out of someone, you need to give them praise. This is a thing I did throughout Midlands. I would always try my best to be positive about whatever an actor or the crew would do. I was being everyone's personal hype man. If I didn't like how someone was performing, I'd try to keep positive by saying stuff like, "This is good, but can you try it a different way?" Or, "I want to have options in the edit." In the edit is one of my favorite go-to phrases for keeping up positivity. And some of the time that I say it, I do mean it. But a lot of the time, it was just to keep up the confidence. Someone once said to me, "You focus too much on the edit while directing." And then I explained what I was doing. To stress this as much as possible, because this is probably the most important thing to getting a good performance from an actor, give them as much confidence as possible. If anyone calls an actor shit to their face on set, or wrecks their confidence, you need to tell them to shut up immediately. Back to the flashback, and it's day 2. The sun has managed to stay consistent on both days, and it's exactly how I pictured it, which was a fun summer vibe. It was like this in October of all months. God, we got lucky. The order we shot things was the Mad Jack and Ennis interaction, Canner convincing Ed to do the deal, and the flashback opening. It all went smoothly, no major hiccups. A lot of the extras were only available on the second day, so I was impressed with our ability to mostly keep the continuity together. Oh, there's one thing I did forget to mention. Ewan, if you remember him from episode 2, is back for this shoot. This is where we started having a 2-camera setup. Ewan had purchased the Mark II version of the camera we were using, and with that we were able to rapidly decrease the time it takes to shoot scenes. We were able to get multiple angles at once, and even sometimes just get random shots that we may or may not use. We obviously couldn't 2-cam for everything, and unfortunately we didn't have the setup to output both cameras to my director's monitor, so occasionally I'd have to look at playback, but other than that, it was a massive time saver. This isn't the type of setup that will work for every scene, especially with how I like fluid camera movement, but it's a massive improvement to the workflow. Then it's time for the edit, which Lloyd is going to do, until his PC blows up midway through, meaning I have to do the second half. Unfortunate, but it happens. Once we had the whole episode together, it felt like it was missing something, specifically a teasery scene at the start of the episode. Kieran and I racked our brains to see what characters we could use before I said we should have Ed, in the present, kill the drug dealer that beats him up in the past. So we set that up and got to work. We have an issue though. We have to replace the original actor with someone who's available. Fortunately, I'm editing a feature for an actor-director, and he's more than happy to do the scene. Both scenes go decently well. In retrospect, I wish I played the opening scene better. But hey, what can you do? It's cool when watching the whole series together because this is one of the last things we shot. I think we were about halfway through filming episode 5. However, chronologically, this happens right after episode 2. It's just interesting for me that they take place so close together, but were shot so far apart. I really enjoyed getting to improv back and forth with Mark, who played the dealer in this scene. We did it a few times, and we found a rhythm and pace that worked. Also, in this shot, I accidentally hit my head on the camera. I didn't even realize, and it looked great. Episode 3 was the cleanest production in the whole series. The shoots were even smoother than episode 4, and we all felt like we were in our element. I love the different genres that both episode 3 and episode 4 feel like. 4 feeling most like a horror, and 3 feeling most like a sitcom. Although the sitcom it feels closest to is It's Always Sunny, since they're a bunch of alcoholic assholes that are constantly trying to get in each other's way. Throughout this video, I'm sure there's a question that popped into your mind. Why not a movie instead? The last 2 episodes should be a demonstrator of why. There's my personal preference for television over film, but if Midlands had been a movie instead, which at some point we were debating recutting it into, it would waver in quality and feel less cohesive. While I love all my children equally, you can see that everyone's skill on Midlands shot up as we progressed through the episodes. You can forgive a show that takes its time to get going or has a rough episode. But in a film, it's a whole experience and far less forgivable in that format. And like I mentioned in the intro, the momentum from completing each episode gave us the energy to continue making these. By this point, we knew for certain we were going to finish the show. There's just one final beast left to tackle, and that's episode 5.
This is where Ennis cracked his head open, right? Something else happened that night. After what the council made you do?
You got me.
During the production of the other episodes, I was tasked with writing the finale of Midlands. I was crazy busy with the production of the show, and Kieran was available to help me write the final episode. We passed drafts back and forth. Initially, the episode started as a 20-minute piece. It was literally Big Dirty Sesh into the epilogue. But when we decided to have a longer runtime, it was given more room to breathe. In case you're wondering, we're referring to any scene in the second half of the episode as the epilogue. Connor suggested using tarot cards to show the states of each of the characters. It's a great idea, and let us set a scene where the pre-drinks took place in episode 3, showing the council haven't changed throughout all these years. His inspiration was the opening scene of season 6 of The Sopranos, where they play a song and the lyrics relate to all of the characters. So, for the first time in my life, I looked up the meaning of every tarot card, and I even paid special attention to putting them in the correct position. We had solidified an ending by this point, and we decided to make it serious rather than comedic. As the intensity ramped up throughout the show, it was moving further away from a comedy and more into the realm of a drama, necessitating a more serious tone. Since we were going all out for the finale, we decided to take as much time as we could and dedicate as many weekends as possible for the show. Along with that, myself, Tristan, Ennis, and Shane all put in €1,000 each to make sure we got all the way. This is the only time throughout the shoots we weren't working with scraps. Episode 5 was shot across 9 blocks, although it really should have only been 6. For example, our first shoot on November 14th was the final Seshika scene in the epilogue. This scene could have easily been done during another shooting block, as it only took a few hours. but we had to be urgent as we weren't going to have access for the council room much longer. It needed to be used as a shed once again, and with that, the council room was decommissioned. We had so many great memories there. Anyway, let's wreck it. We needed to show the decay since Big Dirty Sesh, and it was easier than I thought it would be. All we did was scatter the doors from the council table, flip up some chairs upside down, leave tapestries barely hanging, and throw some empty bin bags around. The darkness of the space also gave it a derelict vibe that we were looking for. Shane had this wonderful lighting setup with it beaming through the window like it's an intense moonlight, positioning Seshika so she's encased in shadow apart from when she's speaking to Mad Jack. During the writer's room, Kieran pushed for Seshika to have a similar arc to Selena Meyer in Veep. She's left distraught and alone. She made it out alive, but at the cost of giving up her Gary. I love the character progression in this scene. Their roles are completely inverse to what they would have been at the start of the series. Seshika is now the one desperate for approval, and Mad Jack is content and confident. In the writing stage, we were debating whether to give this scene to Ennis or to Jack. We settled on Jack because Ennis was the focal point of basically every other scene in the epilogue. But even outside of that logistical decision, it turned out way better giving this scene to Jack. Just before shooting this scene, we shot the first part of the Jack tarot card scene. The purpose of that scene was twofold: the Mad Jack introduction, but also the setup for the radio much later in the episode. We had already set up the radio in episode 2, but we felt it necessary to reintroduce it as a reminder to the audience. Fast forward to December 9th, and we're in our second block, which is the bulk of the epilogue scenes. We'll have to wait till nighttime to shoot the scenes, so the first thing we get are photos of Ed in the vein of security footage. Shane runs to get them printed, along with getting an eye patch for Mad Jack because I forgot it. And then we're ready to go. I wanted to show Ennis's obsession with Ed, and to represent that visually, he has a corkboard tracking where he could be. Ennis made it himself, which is cool as an in-character moment. The scenes between Jack and Ennis were long stretches of dialogue. I wanted to make sure they didn't get repetitive, so I put a focus on them moving around throughout the scenes. The scenes take longer and are more difficult to execute because of this, but it makes them feel alive. Having your characters move around gives the scene a sense of motion. Seeing as this was our finale, I emphasized some of the thematic connections to episode 1. One of my favorites is this small moment here. Ennis knocks into Jack, and Jack waits a minute before deciding to follow him. A callback to this bit in episode 1, and it's foreshadowing that Ennis is turning into Ed. That's more explicitly stated in the next chronological scene. Dan had a great idea when mixing these sequences. The 4 scenes in the house felt empty with not a lot of ambient sound in the area. He added a radio playing throughout all these scenes. For these 2 scenes, you're not supposed to hear what they're saying. It's just for texture. So Dan and I did the voices for it. But the other 2 you are, which meant we needed to get actors. But what if we got real radio presenters instead? As it turns out, Max works in radio, so he was able to get Breffney Clack and Elaine Stenson, 2 radio presenters, to do it for us.
The search continues for Edward Sallow 6 months after he disappeared following the mass homicide of 42 people at a house party in Ballycullen in Westmeath.
Also, do you see this light that comes on when Ennis flicks the switch? Well, that's for show. It's controlled by our phone, but Dan kept missing the timing. On to day 2, and we're doing the Jack-Ennis breakup scene. We start with the car portion, and we haven't talked about how we do car scenes. First, we'll get the actor who's driving, Tristan or Ennis in the case of Midlands. Then they'll drive down a straight lane in first gear, slow enough to stop and react to anything that's coming, although we were on rural country roads that were either private or incredibly quiet, so no other cars showed up. Then Dan would be sat on the floor of the back seat with the mic, capturing the character's dialogue. We also bought car mounts for the cameras, securing them to wherever we needed in the car. We hit record and start driving. It helps that we had 2 cameras. This obviously isn't an optimal setup, as we have to strip the camera down as much as possible, meaning I won't get a feed to my director's monitor, and I can't take the camera off to review between takes because it would take too long. I just have to get as much footage as possible and decide in the edit. But that's what happens when you're working with an extremely limited budget and can't fake a car moving. You've got to do what you got to do. The next part is their argument, and it might be my favorite dialogue exchange in the whole series. This is where we have the direct allusion to Ennis becoming Ed.
How is killing Ed making you better than him?
I'm nothing like him.
My note to Ennis was, say it exactly how I would say it. I'm surprised at how subtle that was, considering how obvious it is in my head. One of the consequences of shooting outdoors in Ireland is that the weather changed 3 times. It only took us 2 hours to shoot that scene. Lloyd managed to clean it up in the color grade, thankfully, but it was fortunate that as we were shooting the final shot, it started raining. Perfect thematic weather. After that, it's shooting in the pub. Thankfully, Ennis has a family member that owns one. We set up and got some of the shots before we needed any of the extras to fill the scene. This includes the montage and the coverage on Ennis. For the TV, we had to use a green screen, as what was going on it was going to be shot tomorrow. This gave us a nightmare in post-production, because it wouldn't matter what we do, it just wouldn't track. It got so bad I was debating if we should reshoot it, or even get a professional VFX artist to track it frame by frame. We were using After Effects for the tracking, and I gave it to Lloyd to see if he could get it to work. He uses DaVinci because he mostly color grades. He popped it into that program and it worked instantly. Like literally no trouble at all. Whatever. The rest of the scene goes relatively well. My mom and a couple of her friends help out by being extras in the pub. It made the space feel alive. And this is also the cameo from my co-producer / DP, Shane. We're getting near the end. The extras are leaving and we have to grab a couple of final pickups and pack away the gear. Then I start getting this crazy pain in my head. I don't know what's going on. It's like the worst headache imaginable. I feel like that one Hank Schrader clip. The guys take over the last couple of pickups. I might have said what we needed, I can't even remember. I'm getting extremely worried on the way back that we won't be able to go out to County Mayo that evening for the shoot tomorrow. I'm in bits. I couldn't survive that car journey. We go back to the place we're staying and I immediately pass out. The pain was so bad I couldn't stay awake. But I wake up a couple of hours later and I'm fine. When talking with everyone, we reckon that that was my first and only migraine. At least I'm back in fighting form. If you remember all the way back at the start of the video, we had referenced an Irish TV show called Hardy Bucks. Anyone outside of Ireland probably doesn't know it, but it was massive here, especially when I was a teenager. The comedic sections and the entire first episode of Midlands was heavily inspired by it. As I said, we're going all out for the final episode, so fuck it, why not try and get a cameo from one of the Hardy Bucks cast? I sent a DM to Owen Colgan, who played Buzz, asking if he'd do it, and he said yeah. Just goes to show you miss every shot you don't take. We trek up to Mayo, shoot the scene, and it all goes great. There's a bunch of great takes that we didn't get to show because they were too funny. Midlands had gotten quite serious by that point, and it would have been tonally off. But yeah, Owen's great. Hopefully I can offer him a bigger role in the future. It's next week, December the 18th, and we have 2 scenes on the docket. The ending scene for Midlands and the Ed Charlie scenes. Oh, we also blatantly missed a shot from the house argument. Thankfully, as soon as I get home from the shoots, I start editing, so we could get that pickup without much hassle. I'll leave talking about the final scene till much later. But I adore the back and forth between Ed and Charlie. If you're not Irish, you wouldn't know that guns are incredibly rare here. Most of our police don't even have them. Guns are a staple in American media, and a lot of the movies and shows that I watched in my formative years had them. There's a lot of fun you can have in the context of a film, but it was extremely important to me that our characters didn't pull them out of nowhere. I wanted to show how difficult they are to get, and I think that should be an aspect of most films / shows in Ireland that contain them. John and I played around with how this scene should go, riffing lines back and forth. There's something that just really does it for me in this scene, and I'm not entirely sure what it is. I think it's the combination of the music, the split between Ennis in his head, and the details between Ed and Charlie. We didn't have the voiceover fully figured out yet, since we weren't sure about the timings for the sections it was supposed to cover. We got that on a later date.
This should make it easy to wipe out any rat that gets in our way.
We're into the new year, and it's January 27th. We have 2 massive shoots back to back. These are the big ones, the ones that require all the extras and the most planning. We'll start with the outdoor shots, because in case you didn't know, the whole Big Dirty Sesh sequence is shot across 2 separate locations. One for the outdoor and one for the indoors. Tristan managed to convince his parents to let us use their house for the outdoor section. It's a great location, with a centered linear path and plenty of room to set up decorations. It was a treat visually, and really suited the escalation I wanted throughout the scene. We allotted 3 days for the shoot. 1 was for the setup, and 2 was for the shooting. There was a big group of us setting up all the tents, fairy lights, and fire pits. We had also purchased more of those tube lights we used in the opening montage of episode 2, to make sure we could see during the night shoot. It all had to be shot at night. A party can hardly take place during the day. We get everything set up, and we've got a bunch of supplies for everyone for when the big day comes. But first we have a day for all the shots that we can do without the extras, which is most of the Seshika plotline. I found the execution of Kieran's death difficult. When going to shoot it, it turned out doing the push was more awkward than I thought. I think the solution we came up with works, but I could have executed it better. It's the final day, and it's the big one. I texted so many of my friends, calling in as many favors and IOUs as I could possibly get. Most of my friends are in Dublin, where we're shooting is about an hour out, and you have to drive to it. We totaled about 30 people who said they would, but when you plan for these things, you should always have leeway for about 10 people dropping out. They'll change their mind or something comes up. It's just a good rule of thumb. Regardless, we got enough people to make the party feel alive. We need to fill out Ed's crew as well. We have Andrew, who already appeared as one of my guys, but also Fergal, Ennis, and Sean in balaclavas, as well as a couple other people. Great, that's everything in motion. Let's start with the Canner and Sinbad walkthrough with Ed's voiceover. There was another Nerdwriter video I had watched ages ago about the show Barry. He says that in the episode Ronnie and Lily, they track through the house to give you a mental idea of where everything is. So when the fighting starts, you're oriented with the space. I wanted to do the same thing with this sequence. The entire part leading through Big Dirty Sesh is to set up the action and give an air of tension, setting up that there's only one route through the house, with the final destination being where our main characters are. Another thing was, we didn't have any dialogue written for Sinbad. Kev was so good at improvising at this point that he would just come out with new hilarious things each time. We had these big gazebos set up, with people sitting in them, people by the gate, and near the house. But after a couple of takes, I realized that during the walkthrough, you couldn't see most of the people. Coming to that realization, we got people moving around and going back and forth. It made everything feel busier. Simple in retrospect, but when you're there with a lot of people, you would think it comes across on camera. Then it was on to the big action scene. First, we had to organize everyone in the background and give them separate roles. Some people had to run away, and others had to fight. All of that gave the scene so much energy, and there are tons of little sections that are excellent. I'll highlight this fight with Ennis, Vic, and a different Shane. Ed's side was a challenge to get right. I bought a bunch of those plastic retractable knives you can get on Amazon, and people had to run into my path. It was a balancing act of stabbing the people in my way and helping them get down to the ground convincingly. I put a lot of energy into the initial lead up to the stab and would grab the person's back while stabbing them in the front to guide them down to the ground without hurting them. That worked out well, but we were seeing Shane's shadow while following me with the camera. This is why I'm slightly offside during this. Even though it was a technical decision, I think it looks great. I love Felix's fight with Ed. I told Lloyd to properly go for it, and it turns out he's really strong. He would push me over to the car and would know when to go down when I stab him. The next fight is what we call the mini-boss encounter with the Tune Barn. Mickey is a great physical actor. All the punches look convincing straight out of the gate. Although in the first take, he died a bit too quickly. It just looks like he disconnected. The music was a massively important element for this scene. For the temp track, we used a Viking song remixed into an EDM track. That was the basis of what Tef was working with. That track had a synthesized war horn, which reminded me of a similar technique used in Into the Spider-Verse with the Prowler theme. They used a synthesized elephant noise for that, which is the direction I gave for this track. I love the ramping intensity in this song, with the ebbs and flows based on the action. Great stuff all around. The last shot was with Charlie after his first kill, where he starts chasing Seshika, Kieran, and Emma. Something that looks planned but isn't is the transition to that from the indoor section. It's just so smooth going from Canner being thrown down to him coming up, which leads us on to the indoor half, which happens 2 weeks later. We have one shoot in between these, but let's not break the flow of talking about these connected scenes. It's February 17th. We have 2 shoot days booked for this. one for the party and one for the Canner and Ennis scenes. This time, the big day comes first. Our location was in the centre of Dublin, which made it a lot easier to get people to come along. Let's continue with the walkthrough, and here's the only whip pan in the show that I like. When shooting outdoors, Kev was wearing a heavy jacket because it was freezing outside. We were shooting in January after all, but now that we're in a relatively small house, it would take way too long to show him taking off the jacket and putting the doctor's coat back on. So a whip pan covers all of that. We continue going through all the sections of the house where there's going to be action until we make it to the kitchen. This is the second time that Kev broke from a Sinbad line. We were improvising some of the kitchen stuff and I suggested, what if you just say he's a mopey fuck so you're gonna leave? It's so fucking mean.
Yeah, you're kind of fucking killing my buzz, so I'm gonna fuck off, but best luck with moping or finding Ennis or whatever your fucking word is.
Next, the Ennis Mad Jack interaction. This scene was meant to be more dynamic, with them moving through the party and having an extended dialogue exchange. That would have included Ennis saying, "I'm not stopping," which is a setup for the same line later in the episode.
I'm not stopping.
This would show that Ennis hasn't changed, just who he's blaming his problems on. The issue is, there's not enough space to do any of that. We chop it down, which is sad, but the scene still feels awkward. Fuck. Okay, we need a new idea. Connor says, what if Jack is just hammered? Fuck it. There's a lot of people here, and I need all the time I can for the action scenes. Let's just roll with it. I say to Connor we'll probably need to set that up at a future date, and that's all good with him. Once we got that figured out, our problems were solved. With that behind us, we can shoot the action scenes. I'm mixed about this section. I love the first part, the movement is slick, and the action feels good. It took it a few tries to get it like that, because I was holding on to the idea that I wanted Ed to get beaten and bruised going through the fights. He'd barely be surviving, which would have been realistic, but we don't have the time or the budget to get that working. Especially if it's just my friends and not stunt performers. Shane said, just act like you're the Terminator, and that made the action click. The second half feels slow in comparison. If you couldn't already tell, I'm a big fan of John Wick, especially the club scene in the first one, which meant I really wanted to do a strobe light. Initially, I wanted this scene to be in a club, but that's of course not feasible with our resources. I like the shot we have, I just think it loses a bit too much energy. This could completely work if we got a pickup over Ed's shoulder, here when I shoot twice and swing the camera when Ed gets tackled. As it stands, it's not bad, I just wish we had more. There was some action that didn't work at all. Canner and Sinbad walked through this portion of the house, and we did get some fighting here. A similar issue presented itself. The space was too small. We got some shots here, but even on the day, we knew it wasn't gonna work. That's day one wrapped, and there's no more stress of having a million extras. There's just the Canner-Ennis scenes, and they're at their absolute best here. Canner really impressed me by being able to replicate the blood spit each take. I didn't picture it coming across so viscerally. A part of the script that I was concerned about was the I just want to see my friend again. I was worried it wouldn't work and would feel forced. Is that enough for Ennis to change his mind and stop attacking him? In execution, yes, it absolutely was. That turned out amazing, like way better than I ever could have imagined. You feel super bad for Canner's character, which ties in incredibly with his death.
Yes, I would see my friend again.
When we conceptualized that Canner would die, I only had one thing in my mind, and that's this shot from Breaking Bad. I loved the look of it, and I wanted to replicate it for Midlands, even down to the cutting someone off mid-sentence. The way we achieved this was, we put a clear glass pane in front of the lens. Then we got one of the spray bottles you use for bathroom stuff, like a multi-surface spray. We cleaned it out, filled it with fake blood, and timed the spray with the gun going off. The spray was temperamental, and not the most accurate. Lloyd was standing off to the side, spraying, but getting the blood right wasn't consistent. After 9 takes, we got the shot that was in the episode. There was an audible gasp at the premiere when Canner died. I love the quickness of his death. No big back and forth, Ennis makes it clear he's not going to go through with it, and Ed finishes the job. Ennis's panic attack is so good. I don't have anything to say about it, it's just some incredibly solid acting. What a cliffhanger this would have been if it was 6 episodes. It works great as a midpoint, but I can just imagine if it was a 6-parter, someone couldn't wait to see the finale. There are 2 alternate versions of Midlands out there. One of them is where Ennis dies here. That would have been a massive shock, killing off our lead character. 2 things are required to make that work. First, being 6 episodes in length. And second, which is more vague, is setting it up so it's narratively satisfying when Ennis dies. Ennis probably would have made more mistakes throughout the series, and he would have been directly responsible for Ed's arrest rather than only partially. Then there'd have to be more interaction between the 2 main survivors, Mad Jack and Seshika, who would be the ones to take down Ed. In this version, the tone would have been much more grim. It would have had Mad Jack going down a darker road, re-embracing his life as a killer with Seshika and Ed both dying. Similarly, the other alternate versions would be like the Spot's character arc in Across the Spider-Verse. In that film, spoiler alert, the Spot starts out as a joke villain and his entire motivation is to be taken seriously. He eventually is and becomes incredibly dangerous. We could have done the same thing with Mad Jack, where Ed is more of an obstacle for Jack rather than the focus of the council. Jack is constantly disrespected for all the ways that he is, leading him to lose his morals and become increasingly twisted until he's the one killing all the council members. In this version, Ed would probably die halfway through, and we need to have a higher episode count to facilitate this. You know what? I lied. There's a third alternate version of Midlands. This is the one that was most likely to happen, where Midlands is a sitcom. Ed would have been a minor throwaway character that is part of the council and always gets arrested for the gang's actions. It would have been most like Hardy Bucks and an Irish version of It's Always Sunny. I'm glad we didn't go down that last route, because as much as I love comedy, all of my favorite bits from this show are the serious moments. I'm still learning and finding my voice as a storyteller. I didn't want to stray too much from a traditional narrative structure, and because of that, I'm happy we didn't go with the other serious alternate versions. I may revisit these ideas and repackage them for future projects, but I wanted to master the basics. I can't break the rules if I don't know what they are or how they work. Back to shooting, and it's our final major block, the tarot card scene on March 16th. This was a one-day up and down job. We didn't even come up the night before. There was a couple of times where we all had to hide under the bridge because it started torrentially downpouring, but we had plenty of time to account for that. The tarot cards were just paper printouts, and we had multiple copies just in case. I insisted on putting Max in a catsuit for this. I just find it so funny. God, the shit I've made this man do. This scene was a culmination of all of our character themes. When Tef came on board to create the score, we knew we wanted a musical motif for each of the main characters. This was reduced to remove Canner because we didn't have the runtime to develop a theme for him, and his character has the least agency on the plot. We gave Tef a bunch of adjectives for each of the characters, as well as a small amount of direction for what we wanted. As discussed nearly 2 hours ago, Ed's theme was based on dark synthesizers. It gave a level of menace, and the higher chanting parts of the track gave him an air of importance. Tef got Seshika's theme right on the first go. It has a level of calm and innocence to the opening section, with the party bells to show an upbeat sesh vibe to her character, but also mirroring the spike of energy she gets in the show. Ennis's theme is the most malleable. It changes the most throughout the series, but when you hear rocking guitars, you know it's for Ennis. There is aggression to it, which is core to his character, and as the series progresses into the 5th episode, it morphs into an old-style kettle whistle about to boil over, showing his rage about to reach a breaking point. Jack's theme was the most difficult to find the right vibe for, especially because his character arc is the most drastic throughout the series. The 10th track was the Dorian Gray Dark Fantasy track. That led us down the right path. Jack's theme has a sad melancholy to it, and while Jack does serve as the antagonist throughout the first 2 episodes, it's really his sadness that's been twisted into a rage by Ed that made him follow this path. I love the ticking clock element of his theme. That merges excellently with the sound design of the Madeline scenes in the 4th episode. The ticking clock represents the emptiness of Mad Jack. Jack, probably of all the Midlands characters, is the most tragic, and his theme reflects that. Jack's theme probably gets played the most throughout this series, and it gets to shine with the extension to his tarot card scene. The plan was to just do the first part, but extending it to account for him being drunk at Big Dirty Sesh fit naturally. I like that there's more of Jack trying to help people and slowly losing it when he gets rejected. It might feel a bit weird if he just showed up at the session, tried to help, and immediately got knocked out. One of the things we got to clean up because of it was this cut. We were moving between the houses, so we couldn't foresee that we'd have to break the 180 rule and make this very dodgy cut. But fortunately with this edition, we solved that problem. Let's go back in time to the 2nd of February, and this is the biggest failure in all of Midlands. The final fight. Oh god. This was a colossal disaster. We have 2 days set aside, Friday and Sunday. We had a break in the middle because there was an event we couldn't miss on the Saturday. The scene had to be at night, and our planned location was a quarry, a Thunderdome situation, but also somewhere that Ed could hide. For lighting, we wanted a single light source, the car headlights beaming onto both Ennis and Ed. We got permission to shoot in a nearby quarry. Ennis scouted and sent videos to myself and Shane, and we thought everything looked good. We'd blocked out the fight scene before, so we had a solid plan of how things were gonna go. We drive down a steep hill into the thick of the quarry and set the car lights up accordingly. Other than the car lights, it's completely pitch black, and it's been raining all day. The ground is mucky and it's not too pleasant to be out, but we'll make do. As Ennis and Ed's back and forth goes on, it becomes abundantly clear that you can't see the quarry. You can't see anything except us and the cars. Why did we even shoot in the quarry if we can't see anything? Well, it's too late now, and we've got to press on. We finished the dialogue exchange, and it's 2 a.m. Our plan was to run through everything we needed for that scene, cut it together, then get any reshoots or extra shots we needed the next day. In our blocking of the fight, there's a lot of being thrown to the ground. We have to roll around in the muck, and it feels fucking terrible. Ennis, Shane, and I press on, and with each retake, it wears us down until eventually we have to stop. We can't go anymore. It's 3:30 in the morning, and we're not even halfway through the fight. Connor has been here the whole time. He's ready to go for when Jack joins the scene, but we never made it that far. Time to admit defeat and go home. Except we fucking can't. Shane's car can't make it back up the quarry. Oh my fucking god, could it get any worse? I start taking stuff out of the car to maybe reduce the weight of it so we can get up the hill. During this whole time, I'm fucking shirtless because my top has been wrecked by rolling around in the muck that I'm warmer without a top. Shane gets up the hill when I'd removed like one thing from the car. Right, that was fucking pointless. We get back to the house and we're all defeated. We're sitting at the table and it becomes clear to me that we can't shoot in the quarry again. I change clothes and go to sleep for the next day. We go to the event, and during the entire time, I'm thinking about the fight and what we're gonna do. It's fucked. It's totally cooked. To add even more pressure onto this, Ennis is moving to England in the next 2 months for a course, so delaying it anymore would be impossible. We're back up on Sunday, and it's announcement time. We can't shoot at the quarry again. There's a resounding thank fuck from everyone there, and we're just going to have to work with the location that we're staying at, which is the local kennels. The place doesn't have any animals staying because it's being sold in the next few months. This is where we enter the location you see in the final film, the cattery. After deciding to shoot here, I feel like a colossal idiot. Any filmmaker would kill to have a location like this, and we've just ignored it for the entirety of Midlands. I suppose we never thought of it because we've been staying here the entire time. We passed by it every shoot and took it for granted. And I suppose animals were there for most of Midlands. So, we've magicked a great location out of nowhere, but now that we're shooting in this enclosed hall space, at least for the first half of the fight, we're gonna have to pull something out of our ass. We've technically had a rehearsal for the dialogue. There's just one adaptation. I raised my voice for my dialogue in the quarry because the space was so open. But since we're in an enclosed area, I think it's better to deliver my lines softer. On to the fight, and we have to improvise, since none of our plans are relevant anymore. The stuff we get with the cages is great, but we can only do so much with the space being this small. We shift the fight outside, and get to reincorporate some of our original plans. Not all of them, but some. This all takes time. A lot of time. By the point we reach the end of the fight, it's 4:30 in the morning. Now it's time. 72 hours later, Connor finally gets to act in a scene. But there's another massive fucking problem. It's incredibly windy and there's so much tree rustling. So far, the outdoor section was done without audio, meaning this is only an issue now. To fix this, we move in between these two buildings here. They're right beside each other, so hopefully the viewer can't tell the difference. We continue shooting, and near instantly Connor's trousers rip. Not like a tiny one either. A fucking massive one between the legs. Well, that's just great. While avoiding the two buildings that would be a dead giveaway that we moved, we also have to avoid showing Connor's underwear. Fuck me. During this entire process, we've been swapping cards quickly to Lloyd, who's been editing together the final fight to see if any cuts don't work or if we need something added. We get to the end of the sequence, and there's a few things that don't work. Quickly going back to replace those shots, and just before the sun starts to come up, we fucking make it. We get everything we need. This shot was planned for the next day, but since it's turning bright out, we may as well get it now. Our victory is short-lived. Upon a finer cut and us not reviewing the entire fight at 6 AM, there's a few additional pickups we need. 2 weeks later, or the weekend after the second Big Dirty Sesh shoot, we return. We get some other small bits, like this montage stuff and the Ed Ennis tarot card scene, which is another slight disaster, because we intended to shoot it at the lake, but didn't bring the same top that Ennis was wearing then. Fuck. We'll just shoot it in the car. But there's another major fucking issue. 2 days before the shoot, Shane gets into a small car crash. He's not injured, thankfully, but he's obviously shook from the experience. I insist that Shane rests, even though he would have done the shoot. Lloyd valiantly agrees to cover for us, even though he's completely unfamiliar with the camera we're using. That's our first challenge. But guess whose car is a stand-in for Ed's in the show? That's right. Fortunately, Ennis's car looks similar enough from a distance, and no one will be looking for those tiny details. One of our biggest issues with the current fight is that none of the kicks look convincing. Let's replace them with punches. That works, and we slide everything together in the edit to make sure it cuts. And that's it. We've got everything we need. One small wrinkle. The camera has a burnt-in LUT that we never noticed. Briefly, a LUT, or a lookup table, is like a template for a color grade. Usually things are shot in log, which is this washed out color you're seeing. That gives you the most color information to change the grade according to what you need. The mistake we made is this camera usually has an input LUT, which displays what it looks like with a LUT while saving the footage in log. That's how it slipped by us. None of us are even sure how it got turned on in the first place, but we roll with the punches. In the color grade, we can only get it to look this sort of dark, unsaturated look, which won't match the rest of the footage. Idea time. What if we make the rest of the epilogue look like that? I mean, why not? It would delineate the time skip from the Big Dirty Sesh section. Everything is supposed to be darker and more depressing, so let's do it. A mistake turned into a cool, creative decision. Looking back on the final cut, it's the best one-on-one fight scene we've ever done. We made a clear effort to make sure you can see what's going on. I really dislike the quick cuts, super shaky action scenes where you have no idea what's happening. A high priority for us with all the action was visibility. The fight's not without its flaws. I think the middle loses some energy. There were some parts that were supposed to be a oneer, and maybe if we had 2 days we could have done that. To be honest, I'm impressed that the fight is as good as it is with the nightmare we had making it. The ironic part is, the stuff we came up with on the spot, the cage fight, is the best section. It's a shame. I wish the rest of the fight could keep up that energy. Not to say it's bad, it's still good. I just see how much better it could be. The part I agonized over the most was the move around the corner. I thought that people could tell the difference. I was really panicked about it. We couldn't reshoot it because the car is gone, and we were losing the location soon anyway. I was even thinking about getting VFX for it. I spent all this time freaking out about it, and it's totally fine. You can't tell the difference at all. That scene is my favorite line read of Ed. It's the one I was the most excited to do. I was partially inspired by this scene from The Boys, and apparently the line,
"Where's your anger? Where's your rage?"
is a reference to a song which I had no idea about. Our plan was to have Ed get up and follow them, breaking down along the way. But with moving around the corner, and Connor's pants situation, it wasn't feasible. I love this scene, it's just filled with so many could-be's. Rolling back the clock, let's talk about the only shoot that's left, the ending of the show, the funeral. We got permission to shoot at St. Etchen's Church, a miraculous location that had a wonderful vibe. Remember all the way back in episode 2 that we were able to get a body bag for Dan? Well, we could also get a cross made, which was amazing. A proper wooden cross, an actual church, everything is working out. We set up the cross separate from any of the other graves as to not disrespect the dead, and got to work. In the edit, we decided to hold on showing the writing on the cross because we thought it would be a nice reveal to end on. Not that anyone was unaware of what the scene was about, but because it was a strong moment. The funeral is broken up with this flashback, which the first part of is shown at the start of the episode. The purpose of the opening scene was to remind the viewer the importance of Ennis and Canner's relationship, along with signaling to the viewer that Canner is about to die. That scene I see in the same light as the cop saying they're retiring. As soon as you see it, you know they're a goner. In my version of the script, it only had that as an opener. Kieran was the one to put the extension to this scene in the ending, and it works brilliantly. It's bittersweet, and it hits you right in the feels. I'm impressed that we were able to pull off such an emotionally resonant ending considering the content and the tone of the rest of the series. But it absolutely lands. The music and the sound do so much for this. I love the church bell that Dan put in, and the song is amazing. Tef did a wonderful job with the music, along with MGem providing amazing vocals. I couldn't be happier with the ending scene, and I'm so proud of how we capped off the series.
My dad has putty. We'll fill it with water like we did in the old times. Come on.
No, I better not. I actually can't. Fucking sorry.
That's all of principal photography wrapped up for Midlands. The last time any major scene was shot was the 22nd of May, 2024. As you can see by checking the date, it's over a year and a half later. It turns out post-production takes a long time. The editing was mostly done throughout the series, and that was a smart decision because if we needed to reshoot anything urgently, we could. But the music, color grade, and especially the sound mix took a long time. Tef wasn't recruited to work on the series until we already had a picture lock. That means the editing won't change. Apart from throwing out big picture ideas, I wasn't great with the nitty-gritty of the musical details. Shane ended up covering that side of it, while I worked on the sound mix with Dan, which took ages. It turns out that having someone sound mix a whole project would be the job of like 5 separate people, especially with us not being clear on what tools we need or how to do a proper workflow. That added additional unnecessary time. That's what first projects are for, though. You remember those mic issues we were having? Well, they're coming back to bite us in the ass. Now that the dialogue has been enhanced, you can clearly hear the crackling in the affected takes, and only some of them are fixable. It's time to get some ADR. ADR, or additional dialogue recording, is replacing the audio in a film that's dodgy with a new, clean version, and the actors have to match their performance. We gather the actors one by one and bring them down to the underground car park at my apartment in Canner's car because that's the cleanest audio location. Here's the thing, it's still a major problem. It's incredibly difficult to make ADR sound good. Sometimes you can get it close, but it turns out that you can even hear ADR in major films if you look for it. They'll spend days in the recording studio trying to get things to match. Keep in mind, a lot of films are shot in a studio, meaning you can replicate the sound of a space easily enough. We were all on location, so matching is tough to impossible, and we had a lot of ADR to do. Some of it worked, but most of it didn't. But then there's a light at the end of the tunnel. We discover a tool that might be the best invention for indie filmmakers across the world, and it's Adobe Podcast. Oh my god, this was a fucking game changer. You can take your audio file, throw it in, and it does its best to clean up any problems. It's not perfect, but it's a million times better than anything we had. Combining that with a quieter version of the original underneath covers most of our issues. Using that in combination with pulling other takes that match the mouth movement is enough to fix our problems. There's one more thing, lines we didn't get in the first place. This was stuff we only realized we needed after the series was nearly finished in the sound mix. Well, we can still get access to some of these locations. Let's just go up with the people we need and get those final lines, and we're done. The mix is as good as we're gonna get it, and it's pretty good. Even I've started forgetting where some of the ADR is, which is a fucking miracle. While I covered this all in one section, this took up so much time. Getting everything into tip-top shape was our priority for a full release. Just know that audio should be a major concern and time investment going into any project. Fast forward all the way to September 2024, and we're going to premiere Midlands in the cinema to cast, crew, friends, and family. Of the options available to us, we settle on the Savoy Cinema in Dublin. It's got the most seats, the best screen, and the best price, an overall win. We're scrambling to get everything ready. The color grade gets knocked out pretty quickly with no major issues. The music gets most of the way there. We have to keep in 1 or 2 temp tracks because of the deadline, but that's fine. Dan and I put in a monster shift, cleaning up the audio mix as much as we can, even pulling an all-nighter right before we have to submit the footage. We've combined all the episodes into one big file, with the logo separating each episode. We even had the poster ready and printed a big pop-up for people to take photos with. It's a real nerve wrack. It's a celebration, but I'm so fucking nervous. This is the big debut. We had shown it to the crew and some of our friends, but they were never in finished states, and it hadn't been seen on a big scale like this. There we are, waiting outside the cinema. Family, friends, everyone turned up and filled the seats. This is the moment of truth. It's time to sit down and watch it all back to back. How did it go? Good. I'd maybe even say great. We got a really strong reaction, and people seemed genuinely invested in the story. I can so clearly remember all the laughs and the gasps. Shane, Tristan, Ennis and I got up and did our speeches, handed out awards to all the parents that were instrumental in helping us get this done, and we went off to the venue we'd booked after to celebrate. That was the best night of my life. It's a wonderful thing with a film project that after years and years of putting in hard work, you can have one big night where it can all be seen and appreciated. That makes it nerve-wracking. What if people hate it? But seeing people genuinely engage with it and talk to me about it was amazing. That's when I realized that Midlands was way more of a drama rather than a comedy. From my perception, I thought about all the funny scenes, and while I knew it drifted towards drama in the last episode, it turns out it does that much sooner than I thought it did. Midlands obviously isn't made for everyone. I could tell that some of the parents didn't vibe with it, but it doesn't need to be for everyone. The target audience is me, and people like me. It's great to have a niche that really vibes with your work. Trying to please everyone ends up pleasing no one. But if no one watched it, and no one liked it, I'd still be happy. We made a TV series that contains so many memories for us, and every time I watch it, I still get excited at the spectacle and all the little character moments. I'm just happy that I got to do what I love. So what's next? Well, we still had more Midlands things to wrap up. The sound mix still needed more work after the premiere, the intro hadn't been shot yet, there was a recap made for the first 4 episodes, and we had to do all the promotional material like the video you're watching now. Will there ever be a Midlands Mayhem Season 2? I don't think so, but never say never. I've thought about it, and we didn't leave a lot of room to keep the story going. Intentionally, of course. We wanted to have a solid ending. It couldn't be the same again. With Midlands, there was a balance of comedy and drama. While it leaned much more towards drama at the end, the comedic elements were always a part of it. If it were to continue, I think it would have to be a full drama. It would lose what it was, and I don't want that to happen. And I'd have to return as an actor, which I'm not sure I'll be doing for a while. I loved it. It was so much fun, especially playing a complete psychopath like Ed. But acting and directing at the same time is incredibly fucking hard. I don't know how people like Bill Hader do it. I'd certainly do other roles if they came my way, but I'm nowhere near a big enough brand to have that happen. And I'd want to focus on improving my craft as an actor. I think that energy needs to go to me directing, which is what I want to do. There are new projects to be worked on. The thing about TV shows is there aren't really festivals to submit them to. And there isn't a culture around indie television like there is for indie film. That's the next step, making an indie feature. I have a solid idea for a script, and I'll be going into the writing process soon. It'll be my first feature film, so it'll be exciting and a new challenge, but I'm ready for it. If there's anything you should take away from this video, it's that it can be done. You can go out there and make a film, show, short, whatever your heart desires. It's going to be difficult, it's going to take a lot of work, but there's nothing more satisfying. If you love telling a story, you won't be able to stop yourself. Do what you can and work with what you have. I wish you the best of luck.